What if Naruto and Sasuke were a new god? Part 4 Team 7, DXD by Rizufi. Gods were interesting. Naruto found himself at a loss for words upon meeting the resident gods and kami that inhabited Takamagahara. They were fascinating. Not because they were strong or because they were gods, but because they defied any and all expectations he had of them. Pre-established opinions and beliefs had painted a rather negative image of the gods, more so due to history and word of mouth than anything. That wasn't to say that they were all good and benign, because even the most kindest of individuals were capable of violence and hate, but at least the gods like Susanoo, who believed humans to be inferior, were set straight upon seeing Sasuke's display of power against the Storm Kami. Your expression is one of wonder and awe. A familiar and silky smooth voice emanated from Naruto's side. I assume your expectations have been surpassed? Naruto's eyes swept away from Sasuke and Amaterasu, who were currently conversing on how to deal with the treachery in the Shinto pantheon, and landed upon the second strongest kami of the Shinto pantheon. Tsukuyomi. Naruto greeted with an easy smile and nod. They're interesting, that's for sure. The silver-haired god chuckled quietly, folding his hands behind his back as he watched over the various kami trying, and failing, to attract Sasuke's attention. They are not all without their sins, he uttered quietly, eyebrows creasing lightly. But who is truly innocent then? Naruto shrugged his shoulders, answering easily, children, though I've yet to see a child here. Tsukuyomi sighed quietly while nodding his head. The Shinto pantheon is forbidden from intermingling with humanity. Unlike those of other religions and pantheons, we choose to keep the divine essence pure and unfiltered. Though, he trailed off, tone almost sad. There have been many that strayed away from the Shinto's strict rules. Naruto studied the man for several seconds, sensing various negative emotions. I take it you don't necessarily agree with these stipulations?
A bitter tone replaces the God-saddened one. I despise them. Mother and father fostered us from nothing. And yet they choose to impose restrictions on what can and can't be done. He shakes his head whilst closing his eyes, hiding the ire and distaste. We have lost many important gods and kami due to negligence. Our children are nothing more than tools. What I once believed to be respect and admiration for my mother and father has slowly bled away to a bitterness and distaste.
Tsukuyomi takes a deep breath, calming himself down. Though, he uttered quietly, opening his eyes and turning his gaze upon Naruto. It seems times are changing. Perhaps fate has smiled upon our home. Naruto was silent for several long moments as he processed Tsukuyomi's words. After an entire minute of silence he responded. Your sister wishes for Sasuke and I to transition. He trailed off quietly, cerulean orbs traveling towards the god. We denied it.
Tsukuyomi closed his eyes, mouth slowly turning upward. I figured that to be the case. I am glad nonetheless. His response came as sort of a surprise to Naruto. He was quickly beginning to realize that Tsukuyomi wasn't like his siblings.
And why is that? Tsukuyomi leaned forward, just a bit, head tilting down to gaze upon the kami he ruled over. The Shinto pantheon has struggled to move forward. We are shackled by tradition. Pointless expeditions and ignorant behavior has fostered among our once mighty force. The Shinto pantheon used to be powerful once upon a time. But as always, stagnation is the death of civilization. If you are incapable of progressing, then you will wither and die.
The god shrugged his shoulders, continuing softly. Religion is no different. Gods like to believe themselves to be greater than others, but we are all finite. Perhaps I am just a young soul trapped in an old form. He sighed quietly, melancholy bleeding into his voice. I am considered an outcast amongst the gods, and though no one is truly brave enough to say so, it is true all the same. I do not think the same as my family, and I believe that is for the best.
Naruto's eyebrows furrowed at Tsukuyomi's words. The way he said, family, was off. As if just saying the word caused pain. It didn't help that he could sense the negativity behind it as well. Something is off. Kurama piped up unexpectedly. I cannot pinpoint the exact emotion I'm sensing. It is strange. It's like trying to decipher a painting that used a single color for its entire palette. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows as he replied, mentally, to his partner, I sensed it too. What's the call? Ignore it for now. Kurama responded slowly. Jumping to conclusions will solve nothing. Let us wait it out, and if it becomes an issue, we'll deal with it. Naruto mentally nodded his head and opened his mouth to respond to Tsukuyomi before halting as a monstrous presence made itself known. Just the sheer weight of the individual's presence caused the hairs on the back of his neck to bristle. Who was this? Dilated cerulean orbs suddenly slitted, blossoming gold as something appeared on the edge of his vision. An absurd amount of chakra rained down in Takamagahara as a bright red orb suddenly manifested beside Naruto.
Naruto's eyes widened greatly upon sensing and understanding the vast amount of raw power forming not but 3 feet in front of him. An unknown man suddenly appeared directly beside the condensed orb of destruction, donning a playful grin upon his face.
Before Naruto could voice his confusion and shock, a bright light spread throughout Takamagahara, followed by the man's voice.
Jutsushiki Hanten, aka. The next thing Naruto comprehended was the shockwave of power that slammed into his body, sending him through the mountain he stood upon. He continued to slam through several mountains, hills and valleys, destroying and toppling the landscape due to the unknown ability.
In what felt like less than a second, Naruto's back slammed into a mountain, sending out an immense shockwave that practically decimated the landscape for several miles before being buried by the earth and rock.
Smoke and ash danced in the sky, clouding the heavens of Takamagahara. Pitch-black darkness surrounded Naruto's vision as several tons of earth, soil and dirt settled upon Naruto's cratered form. A high-pitched ringing noise ran rampant through his head, followed by the muffled voices of several familiar individuals. Golden eyes flicked rapidly as adrenaline suddenly surged through his veins. Naruto, get up! A deep baritone voice roared in the back of Naruto's mind.
The voice caused Naruto to snap back to reality. Gritting his teeth harshly and growling angrily, Naruto's eyes shone an incredible gold as he snatched his right hand free from its entrapment. Forming a half-ram seal, he inhaled deeply before bellowing out a roar that resembled the mighty nine-tailed beast within him.
The loose debris that covered his body seemed to just disappear as if never having existed, Naruto's roar having reduced the mountain to nothing but particles of dust and mineral. A mile-wide empty crater now sprang to life around Naruto, whose body was hunched over slightly, arms dangling down his sides in a relatively lax manner. Something pricked his senses, causing him to sway his head to the left. Less than a millisecond followed as a clenched fist cracked through the air beside his ear, breaking the sound barrier with its speed and causing a shockwave of power to roll through the crater. Naruto's dilated eyes finally caught a glimpse of the man, God, that was attacking him. Spiky white hair framed the man's head, equipped with 2 sky blue eyes that shone like the sun. Gold met blue. Chakra clashed violently. You're not fighting at full power. The unknown god commented with an amused grin. How about we fix that? Naruto's features grew harsh as chakra exploded out from his body, sending waves upon waves of power through Takamagahara. The blonde lashed out with a kick, connecting with the man's ribs. To his slight surprise, the god didn't even seem to want to dodge, fully intent on taking the full brunt of his power. To Naruto's surprise, his leg met an invisible force, not unlike that of Naruto and Sasuke's Shinra Tensei. The force field halted his initial attack but could not stop the sage-empowered shockwave that followed. The teen reveled in the surprise of the god's face as he was sent careening through the earth, smashing through the crater and flipping along the soil multiple times, decimating the already ruined terrain. Naruto scoffed with a smirk, thumbing his nose while standing back to his feet. Nice gimmick, but it won't work against me. His smirk was short-lived as the familiar glow of red bled through his vision. Having been caught off guard during the first one, Naruto grit his teeth before clenching his right fist and forming several one-handed seals with his left. Jinten. Genkei Hakurai no Jutsu. A bright white orb surrounded by a translucent cube formed in front of Naruto's palm before firing off towards the red orb, meeting it halfway and causing a blinding pillar of light to encompass the sky. Naruto took this time to dash out of the crater, strategically placing clones and hanging them into various different objects around the area. Sensing the god, he snapped his gaze to the man, spotting the man floating in the air with a single hand in his pocket and an arrogant smile upon his face. It's been some time since someone was able to negate one of my abilities. How strong are you, I wonder? Naruto frowned at the man's tone, gathering chakra as he did so. Who even are you and why are you attacking me? He was soon answered, but not by the man himself, but from another.
Satoru Gojo. The angry voice belonging to the Shinto pantheon's strongest kami resounded out.
An immense wave of white-hot fire spewed out into the heavens, spanning several miles wide in width. The now-named god didn't even deign the goddess a glance, ignoring her presence as if she was nothing. Tobari. A pitch-black barrier that resembled sludge suddenly sprang out into the heavens, entrapping both the god and Naruto within. It then stretched out several kilometers, negating the immense flames that sprang from Amaterasu's attack.
Well, that solves that. Gojo muttered quietly, ignoring Amaterasu's scream of anger. No more nuisances to distract us.
Naruto's golden orb spotted Amaterasu uselessly slashing her blade against the barrier, unable to penetrate through. Her silver orbs were alight with fury, leaking divine essence as she glared at Gojo. He shifted his gaze upon sensing Sasuke, watching his friend's Rinnegan flare up. Shaking his head no, Naruto silently signaled for Sasuke to not interfere. His friend glared for several moments before scoffing in annoyance and gesturing for Tsukuyomi to speak with him. Nodding silently to himself, Naruto sighed quietly while focusing on the god. Who are you? The white-haired god tilted his head with a smile. Satoru Gojo. He flourished with a bow, almost mocking Naruto as he did. The strongest god that resides in Japan and the fifth strongest entity in the world. The real question is, he asked with a growing smile, rising to his full height and gathering an immense amount of power in front of him. He clasped his hands together before speaking once more. Can you stop this one? Jutsushiki Junten. Ow. Jutsushiki Hanten. aka. Two giant orbs formed behind the god's back, swirling with immense amounts of cursed energy and chakra.
One red and one blue. Gojo then spread his fingers outward, pointing towards Naruto's position.
To Naruto's shock, the two orbs then slowly began to inch closer, colliding and merging into something more devious and powerful. The gigantic orb towered through the sky, nearly reaching the top of the barrier with its insane size. Crackles of unstable purple lightning shot off the abomination of an ability as Gojo donned a malicious grin. Stepping a single foot forward, the god flicked his wrist, snapping his fingers and sending the attack forward to obliterate everything in its path.
Kiyoshiki. Murasaki. Kurama. Naruto mentally roared in his head, hands clasping together in a prayer motion as an absurd amount of chakra rippled through the air, twisting and churning the very fabric of Takamagahara with its sheer weight. Naruto's chakra spiked, hands glowing a divine gold as the entirety of the chakra he gathered suddenly condensed, tightening together and becoming little more than an atomic bomb waiting to detonate. Go! Naruto, Kurama roared, mimicking Naruto's gesture with its own human-like hands. The terrain around Naruto suddenly eviscerated as the condensed orb of chakra forming in his palms began to rumble and vibrate at supersonic speed. Slowly pulling his palms away from one another revealed a condensed Bijudama, pulsing in a sickening manner. An ear-piercing shrieking noise began to emanate as a mountain-sized tornado formed directly on Naruto's position, swallowing him whole, with him in the eye of it. The cratered remains of the earth continued to disappear, being crushed from the sheer force of Naruto's futon chakra. A moment passed by before the twister lurched, dancing and wriggling in random ways. The tornado then roared before suddenly spiking down towards Naruto's position, engulfing the chaotic, condensed Bijudama between Naruto's palms. The atomic bomb resting between Naruto's hands seemed to protest its sudden increase of power, warbling and distorting the very air around its creator, eviscerating anything it could touch and see. Naruto's golden eyes rose towards the rapidly approaching purple orb of destruction before gritting his teeth and rearing his right hand back. Bijudama Rasenshuriken. Without another thought, the teen hurled the condensed Rasenshuriken towards his adversary's attack, tearing through the terrain and completely erasing anything it came into contact with. Red and white met black and purple. Sound ceased to exist. Darkness could no longer lurk. Takamagahara only knew white. Sasuke's dual orbs widened upon witnessing the purple orb that had formed from Gojo's merging of abilities. His Sharingan spun rapidly, desperately trying to decipher and understand what it was seeing. Murasaki? Amaterasu gasped in horror, watching as the purple orb continued to grow in size. Right here? What is he thinking? Sasuke's hands clenched tightly, watching Naruto's reaction to the ability. His friend was easily able to sense and decipher the very nature of the attack he was witnessing. And while Sasuke didn't, or rather couldn't, understand the significance of the attack, he could make a guess or two. What is so significant about it? He questioned harshly, watching the gigantic streaks of purple lightning crackling off the orb. Amaterasu did not remove her gaze away from Gojo and his ability. Her expression only grew more horrified as she gazed down from her position. Murasaki is a technique that is derived from Gojo's innate ability called Mukujin. She trailed off quietly, watching as Gojo's smile began to twist. This ability grants Gojo nigh absolute control over space through cursed energy and chakra manipulation at an atomic level. She grimaced heavily, watching as the orb nearly touched the top of the barrier. Murasaki is the combination of Aka and Ao, which are the two standard forms of Mukujin that allows Gojo to manipulate the space of his Mugen, another ability of his that allows him to stop or slow any and all matter that tries to touch him. Amaterasu shakes her head as she stares at Naruto, watching his eyes grow larger and larger. Ao is the reinforced version of Gojo's neutral Mukagen, in which it seeks to create a vacuum in the targeted space that Gojo wishes. Due to this, Gojo is quite literally creating a scenario where the world itself seeks to correct the created scenario and fill in the negative space he has created, causing all matter in the range of the commanded space to be pulled together.
It is not common knowledge, but he also possesses a stronger version of Ao which creates a black hole, capable of being moved by Gojo's will. Sasuke's face shifts downwards as Amaterasu continues to explain the god's ability. Aka is the inversion of Ao, possessing the opposite effect of Ao. Instead of pulling things together, aka has the ability to repel and push any and all matter away. Due to being an ability that is supplemented by both chakra and cursed energy, it has 2 times the destructive ability of Ao. Sasuke immediately caught on, frowning heavily as he watched Gojo snap his fingers, allowing Murasaki to tear through Takamagahara. Murasaki being the combination of Ao and aka, attraction and repulsion in their base states, he is creating what is tantamount to a long-range singularity that seeks to erase any and all matter at the atomic level.
Sasuke and Amaterasu ceased to speak upon witnessing Naruto's spike. The very barrier they stood in front of warbled and vibrated due to the sheer weight of the teen's chakra. The barrier lurched ominously before slowly correcting itself and returning to normal. Knowing what Naruto was planning to do, a small frown framed the Uchiha's face. He's creating a condensed Bijudama. Sasuke furrowed his eyebrows in confusion, watching as Naruto remained in his base Sage of 6 Paths mode. Why? What was the purpose? Pride. Sasuke immediately shook his head at the thought. Naruto was not a prideful individual. There must be a reason as to why he wasn't gathering natural chakra to create his most powerful cloak and form. And the thought unsettled him. Could Naruto not access his Rakudo Sennin mode? No, that couldn't be it. He was harnessing Sage mode at this very moment. So there must be a more tactical reason as to why. Sasuke's eyes widened suddenly before snapping towards Amaterasu, watching as divine essence poured from her body. The dots connected near instantaneously, causing a pit to form in his stomach.
Amaterasu was a god. This Gojo was a god. Which meant that this man had access to a divine form.
Damn it, Naruto. Sasuke growled angrily, clenching his fists tightly and causing blood to leak from his palms. Why won't you let me help?
A tornado sprang to life around Naruto, decimating and erasing the little remaining landscape that surrounded the Jinchuriki. Miles upon miles of vast terrain reduced to mineral in an instant as the tornado shot down towards Naruto, coalescing and fusing with the Bijudama to create a condensed Bijudama Rasenshuriken.
What is that? Amaterasu found herself questioning with something akin to awe. That is a condensed version of one of Naruto's strongest attacks, Sasuke helpfully informed. However, it isn't his strongest attack. Which means that he isn't trying to overpower Gojo's attack but to negate it. But can he even negate something that erases matter at the atomic level?
Amaterasu watched as the blonde teen began to rear his arm back. An attack of this nature. I don't even know if the barrier will hold. After her words, the goddess of the sun summoned her divine mirror and began to pour an immense amount of chakra into it. Twirling her hands, Amaterasu forced the divine mirror to clone itself, creating 5 separate mirrors that shone like the sun. Making a gesture with her hand, the goddess commanded the mirrors to position themselves on each side of Gojo's barrier.
I cannot trust Gojo's barrier to hold with the immense power being produced by both abilities. The goddess commented seriously, silver eyes glowing like the object she ruled over. By placing my divine mirrors around the barrier, I will at least be able to reflect the damage caused by their attacks. Amaterasu abandoned her position beside Sasuke, flying into the air and unsheathing her katana while simultaneously cutting through the fabric of Takamagahara. From the rip in space was a sphere of golden light that rivaled the brightness and intensity of the very sun itself. Without another thought, the goddess of the sun cradled the object in her hand before closing her eyes and spreading her divine essence throughout Takamagahara, protecting the realm from the inevitable destruction caused by Naruto and Gojo. Praise the sun. The goddess roared as the light from the literal sun washed over the entirety of Takamagahara, covering it in a light so bright that even the darkness was swept up and consumed. Not a second later did the abilities cast by Gojo and Naruto clash. Takamagahara only knew white. A laugh that teetered just on the edge of insanity echoed throughout the vast destruction caused by the clashing of 2 immense abilities. The laughter echoed loudly as it drowned out the silence left in the wake of destruction. You're an interesting kid. Gojo's voice echoed loudly, bleeding through the vast smokescreen created by his and Naruto's clash. Don't die on me just yet. Sweeping his arm back, Gojo physically willed the smoke, ash and dust particles to disappear, revealing a relatively unscathed Naruto whose expression was anything but amused.
Naruto, whose clothes were singed and ruined, curled his nose angrily at the annoying words emanating from the god. You're starting to piss me off. Rotating and cracking his neck, the teen began to dust off the ash from his remaining tatters of clothing. I don't know who you are or why you're attacking me, but
Incandescent colors flowed out from Naruto's body as he began to release the full brunt of his chakra upon Takamagahara. Waves upon waves of chakra slammed into the barrier, causing it to protest heavily. It shook and creaked, slowly showing the damage that Naruto was creating just by releasing his power.
A golden shroud of chakra encased Naruto, replacing his previously destroyed clothing. Donning the cloak of Kurama, Naruto slowly gestured with his arms, twirling them in a gentle manner that was unsuspected for one in the middle of a fight. But upon closer inspection, one could see the very air around Naruto warbling and distorting.
I'm gonna make you regret it. He finished fiercely, practically disappearing from his spot. Reappearing behind the god who had rightfully angered him so, Naruto blitzed the man, striking against his invisible barrier.
Gojo's head snapped towards the teen's direction, making eye contact before being shot across the barrier, smacking through the terrain and carving a bloody tunnel throughout it. The white-haired god ragdolled along the ruined landscape, upending mountain-sized chunks of earth before crashing into and through the barrier he had erected during the beginning of the fight.
Naruto didn't let up. Disappearing in a golden flash of speed, he reappeared just above the god, lashing out with his foot and connecting with the man's invisible barrier. The god cratered the earth of Takamagahara, spearing directly through it and upending thousands upon thousands of massive chunks of rock and mineral. The blonde disappeared from his position in the air, landing upon the earth and speedily running through hand seals. Flaring his chakra, he slammed his hand upon the soil, erecting his own barrier and reinforcing it with the Biju's chakra. If you wanna dance. Naruto spat, holding his hand out while gathering nature chakra upon his palm. A multitude of colors sprang to life around his palm, coalescing into a beautiful sphere that shone like a rainbow. Then let's fucking dance. Not a second later did the rainbow sphere of nature chakra morph and spin, rotating into the familiar form of Naruto's most prized jutsu. Following the formation of the Rasengan was the ear-piercing shrieking and rotating shuriken of wind that announced the Rasen Shuriken.
Naruto's left hand swept through multiple one-handed seals and with one final flare of his chakra, added the most destructive Kekai Tota to his jutsu. The translucent atomic deconstructing jutsu vibrated angrily as it meshed with the rotating blade of wind. Rearing his arm back, Naruto roared angrily while launching the jutsu towards Gojo.
Jinten. Rasen Shuriken. Not a sound was heard as the particle erasing jutsu detonated right on top of Gojo's buried form. The Frankenstein creation swallowed the vast landscape, completely erasing anything it affected. A frown marred Naruto's face for a single moment before his senses shrieked. Twin golden orbs widened as a blur of white appeared on the edge of his peripherals. What? Naruto mentally cried. He regenerated that quickly. Kurama followed up quickly, sharing vision with his partner. While not fully regenerated and sporting a single arm, Gojo's form appeared directly beside Naruto. The god's arm was already reared back, a glowing red orb pulsing brightly in front of his hand. Naruto grit his teeth as he made to dodge the point-blank attack, but he soon found that his body was unable to move as if some invisible force was tugging on him. Behind you. Matabi alerted instantly. Naruto's head twisted behind him, spotting what appeared to be some kind of vortex. It swirled with reckless abandon, swallowing the earth and completely crushing it. Jutsushiki Hunten Shuchuryoku Seidei. Ow. Gojo's arrogant smirk grew wider at Naruto's reaction. We're just getting started. He created a black hole. Naruto mentally cried, eyes widening at the ability. Move. Kurama roared, warning Naruto as Gojo released the red orb in his face. Shit. Naruto cursed loudly, bracing his body for the damage it was about to receive. Boom. The heavens turned black as Gojo's orb detonated directly in front of Naruto's face, pushing his body into the black hole the god created. For what felt like the umpteenth time in Takamagahara, ash and soot rained down from the sky, blanketing it in a thick smog of ebony paint. A tremendous current of air swept the smoke and ash away, revealing the white-haired god. Gojo's sky-blue orbs possessed a slight manic gleam to them upon witnessing Naruto. A low chuckle escaped his mouth, slowly picking up in volume and intensity. After several moments of cackling, Gojo made direct eye contact with Naruto. How strong are you? The gleam in his eyes only further dipped, displaying a degree of insanity that made Naruto sick. Show me more, show me how strong you can get. Naruto scoffed at the god, golden eyes dipping down towards his left hand, or rather, the area where his left hand was supposed to be. In its place was nothing more than a glowing stump, steadily leaking blood upon the soil. With little more than a single thought, his left hand suddenly sprouted from the ruined stump. Bone and flesh crunched in a disgusting manner, slowly recreating the appendage. In less than a second Naruto now sported another left hand. I'd ask why you're so hellbent on fighting me, but
Naruto trailed off as he made direct eye contact with the god. Your arrogance speaks for itself. You just wanna fight someone powerful for useless validation. A modicum of sanity seemed to creep back into the god's eyes. His arrogant smile dipped a fraction as his stance became more relaxed.
It isn't arrogance if it's true, Gojo stated in a matter-of-fact tone, speaking casually as if discussing the weather. But you refuse to let loose. For what reason? You don't seek to clash with all your might. You don't want to let loose all of that stored-up power? Why lie to yourself? Naruto's left fist clenched tightly as a heavy frown formed on his face. Gojo wasn't necessarily wrong about wanting to let loose. Ever since becoming the pseudo-Jubi Jinchuriki, he had to constantly keep his power from fluctuating.
It was tiresome, always worrying about others and the effect he'd have on them due to the sheer weight of his chakra. He always had to keep his emotions in check or he'd run the risk of harming innocent people. And lately, his blood had been practically boiling. Perhaps it was due to finally getting a taste of death.
They say that once you take your first life that you change dramatically. Your psyche becomes altered and the way you think about certain things change. Perhaps that's what had happened with him and he was just vehemently fighting off something that was being ingrained into his brain. Naruto wasn't like others. He had power, great power. Wasn't he meant to use it? Careful. Kurama warned gently. Don't get lost in that way of thinking. Yes, you possess great power and have the full capability of using it, but this power does not define you, Naruto. Always remember that. Naruto took a steadying breath, understanding what Kurama was conveying. Willing the thoughts to the side, he slowly rolled his head, cracking his neck multiple times.
Yeah, he agreed finally. You're absolutely right. I do want to use my power and I do want to fight at full strength and I am lying to myself. With his eyes still closed, Naruto slowly placed his palms together in a praying motion. But I'm not like you. Arrogance due to power isn't something to be proud of. Who cares how strong you are when at the end of the day, you have no home to return to? What truly matters is protecting those who can't protect themselves.
Naruto's body began to glow an even brighter gold, nearly blinding those who weren't already floored from the display of power from the two titans. The skin of his face, feet and hands no longer shone a brilliant gold as they returned to their original tan color. The ethereal horns atop his head grew more pronounced, jutting out farther and higher than previously. The black and gold designs upon his body began to shift and morph, changing and alternating altogether. The fiery haori he once sported now resembled a high-collared jacket, burning a bright gold and ebony. 9 pitch-black orbs slowly sprouted out from Naruto's back before forming a circle behind him. 2 of the orbs then morphed and distorted, changing shapes and forming into thin staffs. The remaining 7 pitch-black orbs behind his back began to slowly rotate, spinning hypnotically behind his back. Do you want my full power? Naruto questioned, resting one of his Gudadama staff upon his shoulder. Here it is, hope you can keep up. Unknown to Naruto himself but not to Gojo, his eyes had changed from bright gold to silver. It was a small change but one that spelled actual danger for the god.
This kid was no human. You're not actually human, Gojo commented in an almost curious-like tone. Or more accurately, you're not entirely human. A normal human would have instantly perished had they absorbed the natural divine essence that Takamagahara possesses. Gojo's smile slowly returned as he gazed upon what he assumed to be a demigod. Finally, someone who can truly push me. Give me everything. Shut up. Naruto roared angrily as he appeared directly in front of Gojo, swinging one of his staffs at the man and making contact with the god's barrier. Gojo's eyes immediately widened as his muggen creaked ominously before cracking and subsequently shattering like glass. Before he could truly think of mantling a defense, one of those pitch-black staffs cracked against his skull, turning the bones in his face to mineral and sending him hurtling towards one of the walls of Naruto's barrier. The white-haired god smashed against the barrier, bouncing off of it and producing several dozen shockwaves due to the sheer force. His face already having regenerated due to the blitz attack of his opponent, Gojo blinked and was once again smashed across his face. The god's head cracked against the barrier once more, causing a minor amount of dizziness to assault his senses. Despite the rabid assault and dozens of attacks he suffered directly to his skull, Gojo was capable of redirecting one of Naruto's staffs. The weapon pierced the barrier, stabbing directly into it and protruding through it. Thinking fast, Gojo made to grab the weapon but was unable to do so due to the weapon morphing and shooting back to Naruto's side. Another vicious crack struck through the air, nailing Gojo directly in the stomach. Due to the strength of the attack, he was forced to hunch over, and in doing so he caught an absolutely decimating uppercut that practically erased his chin and vaporized it. Blood, cartilage and bone flew through the air with some of it splatting upon Naruto's face. Take this. The Jinchuriki roared as he formed a Rasenshuriken in the blink of an eye. He immediately launched the jutsu directly at the airborne god, holding a half-ram seal and causing the jutsu to detonate prematurely.
Boom. The barrier that Naruto created shook and withered due to his jutsu, nearly faltering at the sheer strength of his Rasenshuriken. Naruto swept his hand through the enclosed area and forced both of his staffs to return to their original shape. The Gudadamas slowly joined their brothers, spinning hypnotically behind him.
Faster than even Sasuke could truly move, Gojo appeared directly in front of Naruto, hand racing towards his face with his fingers outstretched. His sudden assault was halted as the Jinchuriki swayed around his fist, counter-striking the man's elbow and shattering it into dust. Gojo grunted from the attack, shifting on the balls of his heels and pivoting his upper body while lashing out with a roundhouse kick. Naruto mimicked the god's own moves in tandem, winding his own leg up to counter Gojo's attack. Upon making direct contact with the man's leg, an incredible shockwave struck the barrier that cratered the land they stood upon.
Fierce silver orbs stared into the sky-blue eyes of the god before Naruto suddenly vanished into thin air. Gojo blinked a single time in confusion before his eyes widened. Unable to truly react in time, Gojo was struck once more on the chin, the vicious blow coming from directly below him. Being sent airborne, he was still unable to react to the vicious and instantaneous attacks assaulting his body. Hundreds upon hundreds of golden flashes sprang around his senses as Naruto continued to assault the god. Bones turned to dust. Blood spewed like a fountain. And before Gojo knew it, his vision was once again ripped from his grasp as another spiraling orb of wind and condensed chakra exploded upon his face, sending him through the landscape and into the depths of Takamagahara. It took the god less than 3 seconds to fully regenerate from the display of power, but upon regenerating, a wicked smile lit upon his face. "I see," he mumbled to himself, regenerating his body even as Naruto disappeared and reappeared, striking from any and all angles at random intervals with no pattern in sight. "You're capable of instant teleportation." To Naruto's shock, Gojo was finally capable of reacting, swaying his head just in the nick of time to dodge a blow that would have surely smattered his brain. "I can teleport too," Gojo commented with a grin before disappearing in a similar manner to Naruto.
A quiet grunt escaped Naruto as the back of Gojo's fist connected with his face. Rolling with the blow, Naruto retaliated with a strike of his own that connected with the god's stomach, blowing a hole right through his body and cannoning him across the sealed barrier. Naruto's eyes narrowed before teleporting above Gojo's form and performing an overhead heel kick to the man's face. Once again, Gojo was fully capable of not only reacting to his Hiraishin but was able to also counter-attack it.
Weaving just slightly out of the way of the blonde's kick, Gojo swung his leg out, connecting with the boy's stomach and sending him rocketing away. Spit ejected from Naruto's mouth, followed by a quiet wheezing noise as he flew backwards. Naruto's body smashed into a mountain, reducing it to little more than rubble and small chunks of earth. His body didn't stop there and continued to flip and roll, smashing into the earth harshly and cutting a deep trench through the already destroyed landscape. "He's able to react to the Hiraishin?" Gyuki questioned confusedly.
"That isn't it," Naruto mentally replied, groaning softly and slowly digging himself out of the ruined earth that buried him. "I think I figured out how that barrier of his works."
"What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Is it not just a standard barrier?" Kakuo questioned softly. "It's more complex than that." Kurama grumbled harshly. "That barrier of his doesn't stop attacks but slows them. It is how he is able to react to Naruto's instant teleportation." "Got it in one, buddy." Naruto supplemented with a nod of his head. "But we've broken through it multiple times, which means it has a threshold we can take advantage of." "Or perhaps that's what he wants you to think," Matabi warned. "We know nothing about this man and his abilities, and while you're capable of grasping his chakra-based techniques, it does not mean we fully understand how they work. That's exactly why I haven't used shadow clones yet. I've been able to tank everything so far, but he hasn't shown his full power." Kurama finished easily. "He is a god, which means he also possesses a divine form. And that means that he's even stronger than what's being shown right now, and I'll bet that he isn't even truly taking this fight seriously." "Yeah." Naruto grimaced as he finally dug himself out of the earth. "That's what has me on edge. But we aren't necessarily going full power either, so let's turn it up a notch then." All 9 of the Biju simultaneously agreed with their container as they began to absorb the natural chakra that permeated Takamagahara. Little did Naruto know that this particular action would come back to haunt him. Amaterasu watched in awe as Naruto not only matched Gojo in terms of raw power and chakra, but that he was capable of overwhelming the man. This is incredible," she whispered to herself, watching Naruto ragdoll the most powerful god in Japan. "What is?" Sasuke questioned from his perch next to the goddess. watching as Naruto blitzed the god, sending him through a mountain. That he's beating Gojo, she replied instantly. I have never seen Gojo get pushed like this. Sasuke frowned hearing this. What did it matter? The man had yet to even truly power up, but he would just take Amaterasu's word for now. This unknown god had history in the Shinto pantheon if Amaterasu's reaction earlier was any clue. And it was anything but good history. The couple watched Naruto and Gojo trade blows before something significant happened with Naruto finally using Kurama's chakra. They watched as Naruto completely overwhelmed the god, beating and smacking him along the terrain with ease before one of Naruto's jutsu clouded the barrier. That form is different than the one he used against me, but it feels weaker somehow, Amaterasu muttered with furrowed eyebrows. That's because it technically is. The Uchiha replied while crossing his hands, watching as Gojo finally mounted a counterattack, blitzing Naruto and causing the teen to lose one of his hands. He's only using around a tenth of his total power in that form. A tenth? Amaterasu exclaimed loudly, watching as Naruto regenerated his left hand just as easily as Gojo had been doing. Why doesn't he just go full power then? Sasuke scoffed as he replied, because he doesn't know how strong Gojo actually is.
In theory, it does make sense. Fight at your strongest to end your opposition as quickly as possible. But here, Naruto cannot afford to do so. Instinctually, he is aware of how powerful Gojo can be and has a very good interpretation of just how much power is truly needed to match him. The depth of Naruto's senses seemingly has no bounds, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he somehow knew he could take Gojo on in his divine form.
Amaterasu glanced towards the Avenger with confusion. But you just said he has no real idea on how powerful Gojo is.
Sasuke shrugged helplessly as he responded. Naruto's sensing capabilities are off the charts. Just because he doesn't know the entire depth of Gojo's power pool doesn't mean that he himself believes he'd lose. But this is going purely off what we've experienced in our home world. Gojo could just be stronger, and that's that.
Amaterasu glanced back towards the fight, watching as Naruto placed his hands together before once again, powering up into a different form. Her silver eyes slowly began to widen as she sensed what was happening. Wait, she spoke frantically, he has to stop, he's going to kill himself.
Sasuke was taken aback as the goddess rammed herself into the barrier, bashing her shoulder against the invisible force with all her might. After several failed attempts of trying to bash through, the goddess unsheathed her blade before trying to penetrate through said barrier.
Hey! Sasuke snapped as he snatched her wrist, yanking her away for the barrier. What are you talking about? How is Naruto killing himself? The Shinto goddess ripped her arm free of Sasuke's grasp but did not relinquish her gaze from Naruto and Gojo. I sensed it. Sensed what? Sasuke snapped angrily. Speak some sense. The divine essence. Amaterasu snapped back in return, turning directly toward Sasuke. Whatever he just did in that form is going to kill him. Humans cannot absorb unfiltered, raw divine essence. Sasuke's expression scrunched in confusion as he turned his gaze back onto the fight. What are you talking about? He doesn't look or feel any different. That form harnesses pure nature chakra that is then balanced equally in tandem with spiritual chakra and physical chakra. But the uniqueness to that form is its ability to harness Rakudo chakra. The goddess once again tried to slash through the barrier, growling angrily. That's the point. There isn't nature chakra in Takamagahara. And if you haven't already realized, there is no Rakudo chakra on this planet. Just because they feel similar doesn't mean that they function the same way. The only energy that flows through this realm is pure, divine essence. Just look at his eyes. Sasuke furrowed his eyebrows before using his enhanced vision on Naruto. He was taken aback upon noticing the silvery gray color of his eyes instead of the yellowish gold he had come accustomed to.
But he couldn't sense anything different about Naruto. It didn't make sense. If Naruto truly was absorbing the energy that only gods could use, why wasn't there a difference? Like I said, Amaterasu spoke through Sasuke's silence. It may function and feel similar to the energy you use, but it is not the same thing. She made to take a stance, drawing her blade and gathering a frightening amount of chakra. If we do not stop this fight, he is going to die.
Sasuke ignored the woman's failed attempts at cutting through the barrier, already knowing a lost cause when he saw one. If Naruto was going all out, then he'd have reinforced the barrier with his own chakra. And there was no one that could match Naruto's chakra in density, volume and output. And as amusing as it was to see his best friend obliterate this unknown god, bashing him along the terrain like one would a toy, he needed to heed Amaterasu's advice. She was the expert here when it came to this world's chakra and how it functioned. Who was he to question her about what did and didn't work? Stepping up the barrier and closing his right eye, the teen activated his Rinnegan, causing the dojutsu to glow. Focusing directly on Naruto's body, he attempted to switch places with him by using a Minato Hikara. Flaring his chakra and activating the ability, Sasuke was left with a growing frown upon his face when he didn't actually teleport. Activating his Sharingan and roaming it all along the barrier caused his frown to deepen.
Even I can't get through this one. Sasuke side glanced at Amaterasu watching as she struggled to even make the walls ripple. Her face was one of desperation as she slashed, hacked and stabbed at the barrier. He shifted his gaze back upon Naruto and watched as the boy placed his hands together one more time, gathering an absolutely absurd amount of chakra and divine essence.
Damn it no! Amaterasu roared upon noticing what Naruto was doing. Naruto, you have to stop, she wailed whilst abandoning her sword, banging her fists against the barrier. You're killing yourself. You can't absorb anymore. Stop. Sasuke's fist clenched even more at the goddess's desperate cries. Was there nothing he could do to stop his friend from continuing this fight? Why did he feel so useless again? All this power and he couldn't even use it. Fuck that. Sasuke flared his Rinnegan while channeling the full force of his chakra. He was moments away from activating his perfect Susanoo before a luminous pillar of grayish chakra exploded out from the barrier, nearly blinding him. Naruto blinked and found himself in the vibrant landscape that belonged to the Biju. Furrowing his eyebrows in confusion, he glanced around, taking note of the unique features of each and every beast. He spoke while pivoting on his heel and facing Kurama, the pseudo-leader when it came to most conversations. What's going on? We're in the middle of a fight.
Kurama said nothing at first as its crimson, slitted eyes stared down at Naruto. There was something off about the gaze and for some reason Naruto found that he was getting anxious. He didn't like it.
There's no easy way of saying this. The nine-tailed beast spoke slowly, tails waving lazily behind. Naruto, you're dying.
The blonde teen blinked at his friend's words, slowly crossing his arms against his chest. He was silent for a few moments before smiling and letting out a small chuckle. Oh, you're making a joke. Haha, that was a good one, Kurama. He shook his head with a fake smile, chuckling quietly. But really, why are we here?
Naruto. Matabi spoke gently. Don't do this. His smile shifted just a little more, becoming brittle. Do what? We don't have much time left, so stop playing around, brat. Son Goku states firmly, giant monkey fist slamming the floor of the landscape like an ape would do. Naruto flinched at the beast's words, cringing as he processed what was being said. Taking a few moments to calm himself, he deigned a glance at the Kyuubi. How? His voice was small, like a child. Kurama released an agitated huff, not due to Naruto but because of itself. The energy we're absorbing is killing you. I should have noticed it immediately once you started to use my chakra. The beast's tone had a regretful lull to it, something that was surprising to hear due to how prideful Kurama was. But I don't feel any different. Naruto trailed off with a frown. Is it not nature chakra that we're harnessing? It is not. Kurama answered quietly. Regardless of how similar it is to our world, it is just not the same. And for some reason, your body is unable to handle it. Naruto grimaced at the words. Is there no way to stop it? Matabi sighed quietly, dual-colored orbs falling to the floor of the landscape. Your body has already absorbed far too much of this energy. There's nothing we can do at this point. Well, that wasn't fair. Tears coalesced in Naruto's eyes, but he was quick to rub them dry, donning a fake smile. We had a good run, huh? The Biju all collectively frowned upon hearing the boy's tone. They were all quiet, not truly knowing what to say or do. Naruto sighed quietly before just plopping down onto the floor of the landscape, dragging his fingers along the vibrant floor. How long do I have? The only reason you haven't died yet is because you hold all of us. Any other individual would have died as soon as they absorbed the energy. Kurama replied. As for exact time? The beast trailed off for a few moments before continuing. Enough to stomp on that annoying god's head. Naruto cracked a smile at Kurama's words. Consider it done, buddy. He held his fist out for Kurama, retaining his small smile. Kurama did not hesitate to ball its giant human-like hand, gently tapping its much bigger appendage against Naruto's. It's been an honor having you all beside me. Naruto finished after retracting his fist, slowly rising to his feet and spinning in a circle to make sure he looked every Biju in their eyes. Thanks for believing in me. I wouldn't be here today without all of you. Each of the Biju showed their gratitude in their own quirky and unique ways, whether that be from Son Goku pounding its large chest or Saiken bubbling and squirming in an odd manner benefiting that of a slug. Kurama watched Naruto as he walked up to each of the other Biju, saying his goodbyes whilst offering any comforting words he could. A snarl wished to escape from its giant maw, but Kurama refused to allow it to slip through. Upon circling back to Kurama, Naruto's face softened into a small smile. Despite all our differences and negative experiences with one another, I appreciate everything you've done for me regardless if it was done out of survival or pity. Bowing at the hip, Naruto continued. Thank you, Kurama. I'm gonna miss you, buddy. This time, a snarl did escape its maw. Stop it, you annoying little shit. Naruto returned to his full height, cackling at Kurama's reaction. Make sure to watch over Team 7. We're all a bit cracked since coming to this new world. Don't let them do anything I wouldn't. No one can achieve the stupidity that you do. Love you too, fuzzy butt. Naruto grinned widely. He took a moment to breathe, slowly closing his eyes, relaxing his body. See ya soon, Mom, Dad. Arrow Sennin. A few moments of silence passed by before Naruto opened his eyes. Let's go beat a god. The Biju all roared in agreement, shattering the landscape they shared while sending Naruto out of his subconscious. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, revealing his silver eyes. Glancing down at his body, he was confused as to why his body was no longer gold. His body was now in a similar state of dress that Madara had been in when becoming the Jubi Jinchuriki. He sported a white robe that possessed several black magatamas along the collar, not unlike Madara had possessed, save for the robe being tucked into his side. Naruto's robe was open, revealing his bare chest and black hakama pants that also possessed several black magatamas. His 9 Gudadama remained behind his back, swirling as hypnotically as they always had. I don't feel all that different, he mentally mumbled, checking out his new attire with a critical eye. Not really a fan of the black and white, but it's not like it'll matter. I won't be here for long anyway. Stop talking and fight. I have a theory and I don't think you'll like it. Kurama grumbled in annoyance. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Kurama's words but shrugged it off in lieu of searching for Gojo. The dust had yet to settle, and without moving, Naruto cleared it with a thought. Naruto spotted the god several meters away from him, floating slightly in the air with his hands in his pockets and an arrogant smile upon his face. That smile may have annoyed him previously, but as of now, it had no affect. What's this theory you have? Naruto questioned while clenching his fists, ignoring the black gloves on his hands. It is only a theory, but I believe you have the ability to kill this god now. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Kurama's words, but Amaterasu said that only other gods can kill a god. Or if you possess a Longinus sacred gear. She made that pretty clear. It is true that we don't possess a Longinus sacred gear, but we do possess a god now. Kurama answered back.
Naruto furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. What are you talking about? Before Kurama could answer his question, Gojo appeared out of thin air, cursed energy clenched in his right fist. Kokusen. Without any effort whatsoever on Naruto's part, he reached up with his right hand, stopping Gojo's attack while stepping into his guard. He seemed to move in slow motion as he pivoted on his right heel, digging deep while gyrating his hips and throwing a punch out with his left fist. When Naruto's left fist connected with Gojo's stomach, a vacuum appeared right at the center of his attack. It distorted for a moment before erupting, blowing a hole straight through the man. Gojo's eyes widened in surprise as blood spewed from his mouth, painting Naruto's new robe red. Not allowing Gojo to move, Naruto clenched his right hand, turning the man's bones to dust. Lifting Gojo with one hand as if he was child, Naruto proceeded to slam the man directly into the earth. The sheer force from his attack shattered the barrier he had created to keep anyone from getting harmed by his fight. Ignoring the now broken barrier, Naruto raised his left hand while channeling chakra. A vortex spiraled to life before creating a recentrican made of black chakra. Not questioning the odd color, Naruto proceeded to slam the jutsu directly on top of the man. What followed was the biggest explosion to date so far in their fight. Miles upon miles of terrain and earth were ripped from Takamagahara as dust and minerals swept through the realm, blinding any god and kami unfortunate enough to be looking in their direction. The very heavens of Takamagahara cried, vehemently denying the strength that belonged to Naruto. Rain began to fall, dousing the realm in water. What I mean, Kurama continued after being interrupted, is that you are now a god. Well, not technically, but you possess the energy that they do. In theory, you can actually kill Gojo. Naruto frowned upon hearing Kurama and swept his arm through the clearing, causing several cyclones to assault the landscape. Water droplets pelted him from above and he ignored them in favor of searching for Gojo. The god had managed to teleport a millisecond before being blasted by his jutsu, and while slightly annoying, Naruto could deal with it. The teen felt the familiar tug on his back from Gojo's black hole technique and ignored it as Gojo flashed directly in front of him with a purple orb floating upon one of his hands. Naruto's expression remained flat as he reached out with his hand, grabbing the purple orb with his bare hands and channeling Jinten chakra. The particle erasing cube of chakra engulfed both men, expanding almost 200 meters in all directions. Naruto met Gojo's gaze before offering little more than a smirk and flaring his chakra. Unknown to Gojo, Naruto performed a substitution with a spare clone left over from his original batch during the start of the fight. The 200-meter-wide Jinten cube proceeded to explode, taking Naruto's clone and Gojo with it. The real Naruto flew into the air unscathed, silver eyes roaming the earth in search of Gojo. He didn't bother making more than the minimal effort necessary considering that Gojo had shown an incredible regenerating ability. But perhaps it would take longer due to the fact that he now possessed divine energy, something that was actually able to harm the man. Sensing movement to his right, Naruto turned his head towards it, spotting Gojo appear out of thin air, completely unharmed save for the minor amount of blood that now trickled down his nose. You managed to actually hurt me. The arrogant god spoke in a tone devoid of the manic glee he had once possessed. It's been several centuries since the last time I was actually injured. Naruto stared at the god with an annoyed frown. And, do you want me to praise you? Gojo cackled at the teen's response. On the contrary, I want you to keep going. Naruto ignored the stabbing feelings in his chest as he tilted his head. You're annoying. The god grinned at Naruto's insult. I get that a lot. He trailed off upon witnessing a trail of blood run down Naruto's nose and ears. Seems like you don't have long. Again, Naruto ignored the pain in his body in favor rolling his shoulders. That just means I have to take you with me. Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash, appearing directly above Gojo with a Rasengan in his hands. Gojo's Mukujin was useless to the speed and strength that Naruto possessed and shattered like glass, allowing Naruto's Rasengan to smash directly into the man's face. The teen allowed his Rasengan to carve and smear Gojo's face into little more than nothing but blood and flesh before following through and sending the god into the terrain. The god's impact caused an earthquake to shake the realm, and before being able to regenerate, Naruto flashed directly above him once more. Naruto's Gudodama pierced Gojo's incapacitated body, halting the man's regeneration momentarily and allowing Naruto to gather the chakra necessary for his next jutsu. Splotches of black chakra painted the landscape as Naruto jumped into the sky, holding his hand above his head and assaulting the realm with his chakra. The black splotches of physical chakra began to twist and turn, coalescing around Naruto's left hand. A Bijudama slowly formed, stretching out nearly a mile wide before being engulfed by the black chakra circulating in the sky. The jutsu began to vibrate and an ear-piercing shriek assaulted the heavens. The familiar rotating blade of wind jutted out from the Bijudama, creating a heinous-looking Bijudama Rasenshuriken. With blood running down his face, Naruto grit his teeth and hefted the giant jutsu. Shifting into the avatar of the Kyuubi, which no longer resembled its original glowing, yellowish-golden form, now being replaced by an ethereal black cloak of chakra, the avatar of Kurama roared loudly. The giant construct brought its other massive paw towards the jutsu as Naruto once more channeled the most destructive Kekai Tota that belonged to the elemental nations. An incredulous wave of chakra was released as Naruto imbued his jutsu with Jinten. Naruto coughed up a hefty amount of blood that painted his white robes a new shade of crimson. With aching arms, he commanded the avatar of Kurama to hold the jutsu with both hands. The construct of chakra raised the jutsu above its head before throwing it directly down at Gojo's incapacitated form. Ignoring the golden flash of energy that swept through Takamagahara, Naruto roared. Rakudo, Jinten, Udama Rasenshuriken, and the entire realm of Takamagahara wept as Naruto's jutsu collided with Gojo's body. A flash of white was all that was seen. Death was pretty lame if Naruto was being honest. Being a shinobi all his life, a Jinchuriki at that, he had pondered what death was like at a very young age. Was there an afterlife? If so, was it peaceful? Was it beautiful? Worry-free? No stress? Would he be able to see his beloved parents and friends again? His father had kind of alleviated some of those questions once he met him during the war. It was clear that there was an afterlife if the words chosen by his father were anything to go by. His mother awaited in the Pure Lands with open arms, longing to hold her son since her untimely death. It had both saddened him and made him feel happy to hear these things from his father. Though he and Minato would likely never see eye to eye, what with the whole Jinchuriki sealing business and whatnot, Minato was still his father. And though he had done what he believed to be the only logical choice, his father had believed in him from the start. Which was big praise coming from a man many believed to be the second coming of Hashirama and Madara. But he was going off on a tangent, wasn't he? Death was lame. Where was the Pure Lands? The loving faces of his mother and father. The joyous shouts from his peers and friends during his time as a shinobi. It was nowhere to be found. It was only pitch black. A black that was blacker than black. Which honestly didn't even make sense. How could something be blacker than black? Yes, there was different shades of black, but black was black. Didn't make sense if you asked him. You are incredibly annoying. Please, stop thinking. That voice was incredibly familiar. Deep baritone, check. Angry rumbling undertone, check. Hate-filled words that held just the barest amounts of affection, check. I can assure you that it is only hate. You make me sick. There was no doubt about it. That was certainly Kurama, but that didn't make sense either. Kurama was just chakra given sentience with a pseudo-physical body. If he, Naruto, died, then Kurama would just reform in a few years' time. And that went for all of the Biju as well. So why was he able to hear Kurama? 'Cause you're not dead, idiot. And that blackness you see is your eyelids, you stupid mongrel. The fact you were able to live on your own for so long is a miracle. That was uncalled for and incredibly rude. It's almost as if Kurama completely forgot that it was the sole reason he had to live on his own to begin with. Asshole fox. Naruto released a quiet groan as his eyes slowly fluttered open. Smog, smoke and ash painted his vision as he stared into the sky. Instead of the beautiful blue sky and fluffy clouds that had once painted Takamagahara, it was now nothing more than cinder and brimstone. If he was secretly in hell, then he wouldn't have even challenged the notion. A small part of him was both confused and guilty. What had even happened? His head was absolutely pounding and he was finding it incredibly difficult to even think. Mentally, he was a wreck, but physically, he felt completely fine. There was no soreness, no injuries, no bruises, no cuts, no pain. But that didn't make sense. He had been fighting someone incredibly powerful, someone who could shake off one of his strongest attacks while barely batting an eye. What had his name been? A brief image of a man with white hair and distinct blue eyes suddenly flashed through his mind. An arrogant smile painted his features and two words came to mind, jostling his memory and causing an influx of information to rack his brain. Gojo Satoru. Naruto immediately rose to his feet, silver eyes scanning the ruined and barren landscape. A pit began to form in his stomach as he surveyed the destruction he had caused. He did this. A wave of nausea swam through him as he took stock of the damages. He had brought ruin and destruction to the home of the Shinto gods. He had used his power with blatant disregard of those around him. Shame coursed through him at the thought. He had promised himself to use this power to protect others and those that couldn't protect themselves. As his eyes scanned the blackened and dead landscape, he couldn't help but feel detached to it all. How could he have done this? How could he have caused all of this? It wasn't justifiable. Not for a moment. Well, look at you. Naruto rounded on the familiar voice, eyes burning a brilliant silver. How did you even survive? The god smiled, as if preening. Me. He chuckled at what he perceived to be some kind of joke. As to how I survived, who knows? Maybe because I'm just that much stronger than you. Anywho, how ya feeling? Was he? Naruto's face scrunched up in disbelief. Are you serious? Gojo tilted his head with a raised brow. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't being serious. He wagged his index finger side to side as he continued. It's important to take care of one's body.
Anger swirled to life in Naruto, threatening to overtake his entire being as he stared at the arrogant god. This god was being so lackadaisical about everything. Even during their entire fight, it was all a game to him. The worst part about all of it was the complete lack of malice and negative intent during their entire fight. Gojo hadn't been attacking him with the intent to kill or maim or anything. He was fighting him just to fight. And that angered Naruto even more. It only led credence to the fact that this god had fought him just because he could.
Divine essence leaked off Naruto as his eyes dilated, becoming glossy and unfocused. A power he didn't recognize nearly burst forth from his pores. It encircled around him, gently caressing him while whispering sweet nothings.
It was enticing and intoxicating. The strength of 1,000,000,000 men and women sat at the edge of his fingertips begging to be used. He even entertained the thought of just allowing it to lead him, but only for a second. Reality snapped back into place and Naruto snuffed the power out before it could hope to escape, locking it away.
Ho! Gojo mused aloud with his hands in his pockets. Your will must be incredibly impressive if you can deny its instinctual calling. You're becoming more and more interesting by the second. Shut up. Naruto snapped angrily, eyes burning a deep vermilion as he stared at Gojo. Do you have no remorse? Empathy? Sympathy? A hoarse rasp escaped Naruto as he swung his arm to the side, trying to highlight the destruction of the realm they stood in. Do you think this is fine? Gojo's blue eyes scanned the destroyed realm with a bored hue. His right hand vacated his pocket, producing a black cloth. He then took the cloth before wrapping it around his head, covering his sky-blue eyes.
Takamagahara is not my concern. Naruto's disbelief only grew. Was this man not a Shinto god? How could he say that? My only concern is the safety of Japan and all its inhabitants. Naruto's anger stilled, if only for a moment. Then why fight me? Why do any of this?
Gojo tilted his head and raised one of his hands. Well, for starters, because I can. 2. Because I felt like it. And C. Some unknown entity that can decimate an entire faction and religion by themselves needs to be watched. And by watched, I mean monitored. And by monitored, I mean babysat. Naruto didn't necessarily fault those reasons. Well, at least the third one. This god was arrogant after all, disgustingly so at that. However, that didn't excuse his actions. He was also an annoying prick and his quirky attitude was grating. He was reminded of Kakashi but on a scale that put his sensei to shame. And you couldn't have accomplished that third one without destroying an entire realm. A simple talk would have cleared this from the jump. Naruto's tone shifted angrily as he shook his head with a scoff. But who am I kidding? You're a god. You don't give a shit about ethics or morality. All you care about is strength, image, and stroking your ego. You think because you have all this power that you can do whatever you want with it. You make me fucking sick. Gojo merely offered a small shrug at the boy's words, not really caring. You already possess a predisposed view of me due to personal beliefs, so trying to convince you otherwise would just be a waste of time on both our parts. The god was silent for a moment, letting his words sink in before tilting his head and looking past Naruto. Also, I don't know why you keep worrying about Takamagahara being destroyed. It's the land of the Shinto kami for a reason. I doubt that Izanami or Izanagi would allow their precious dimension to be reduced to ashes.
Not a moment later, the very earth and soil began to lurch and rumble.
The charred landscape began to change, life somehow being breathed back into the very soil and earth. The raging fires and mountainous smoke screens began to dissipate, clearing the blackened skies to allow sunlight to shine once more.
Naruto watched all of this with disbelieving eyes.
Exiled I may be and hated by the Shinto faction I however am a man of my word. Gojo spoke, watching Naruto's confused expression. I promise to protect Japan and all its people above all else. You don't have to like me, and I don't really care either way, but I am not your enemy. You'd do well to remember that.
Naruto's bottom lip curled downward as he stared at Gojo. Save your bullshit for someone else. If you really wanted to assess a threat to your home like you say you do, you would have spoken with me instead of resorting to violence. Don't act like you give a shit about Japan or its people now.
Gojo tilted his head at Naruto's response before making a quiet, noise. I get it now. He turned his back on Naruto before slowly walking away and waving over his shoulder. You want everyone in the world to operate on the same philosophical belief, of some kind or another, but can't take having an individual who refuses to operate so mechanically and one-dimensionally. You think the world is black and white, kid. Naruto stared at the god's back, watching him retreat with fierce eyes. You don't know a single fucking thing about me, you arrogant prick. You don't know what I've been through. The things I've seen and experienced. Silver eyes bled a bloody crimson as Naruto spat. How could you possibly think you know me? I know enough. Gojo retorted easily. There was a tense silence that followed the god's words. Any amount of goodwill or patience that Naruto possessed seemed to just evaporate. Without truly thinking of the potential consequences, he spat his next few words. Step foot into Kyoto and you'll never have to worry about Japan or its people ever again. Naruto threatened. The god finally paused at those words, coming to a pause and dipping his head. He was silent for several seconds before eventually nodding his head.
That a threat? Gojo questioned calmly. Naruto tilted his head, lip curling downward as he sneered. A threat would entail that I'm incapable of dealing with you.
The white-haired god was silent for several long seconds before shrugging his shoulders with a nod and speaking one last time. Enjoy your life, new blood. With those parting words, the god shimmered into 1,000 particles, disappearing from the Jinchuriki's senses. Naruto stared at the shimmering particles with disdain before turning his head and spitting on the reformed grass. You have bigger things to worry about right now, kid. Yeah, and what's bigger than this Kurama? Naruto scoffed in aggravation as he kicked a lone rock. You're no longer human. Naruto blinked at his partner's words before glancing down at his state of dress and noticing the odd black and white robes. His previous anger at Gojo began to shift as his fingers curled in random intervals. Annoyance. Pettiness. Naruto proceeded to drop to his knees before covering his face with his hands. He then proceeded to control his breathing to the best of his ability. A deep inhale followed a hearty exhale as he did the only rational and logical thing he could do given the circumstances of his current situation.
He screamed loudly. Sakura sighed quietly to herself, staring out into the night sky of Kuo. "Yeah, no, I really don't have anything against you."
"Yeah, I know. If I did, you wouldn't be alive," Sakura stated easily. A wave of cold air caused her hair to whip wildly. "At least the city looks kinda nice from here." Kuroka sighed quietly to herself from her perch. "Yeah, NYA. It is kinda nice." She was silent for a few moments, watching as people went about their lives. "What are we doing up here anyway, NYA? Waiting for Kakashi. He's going to be taking over my duties while I help Rias." Kuroka scrunched her face up at Sakura's words. "I still think you're biting off more than you chew with this. What makes you think Rias' previous betrothed will even allow a rating game? He could take this matter above us and it could potentially become an issue with the yokai or even the Shinto." Sakura was quiet for a minute or so before shrugging. "While I don't think it'll reach that point, I do believe I can at least guide the issue to keep it relatively close to the ground. It's easy to control an arrogant individual. Good luck, NYA. Does Yusaka-sama know what you're doing?" "Nope," Sakura answered easily, glancing down at the phone in her hand. "It's going to stay that way too. I wish to keep this as quiet as possible until it's over."
"You don't have a single clue as to what you've just gotten yourself into, do you?" Kuroka questioned seriously. Sakura glanced at the Nekosho with an expression that required an explanation. The cat yokai rolled her eyes before speaking. "Who is Rias Gremory?"
"A devil heiress," Sakura answered with furrowed eyebrows. "A devil heiress who just so happens to belong to one of the strongest pillars left alive, whose older brother is the current and arguably the most powerful Lucifer to exist, and who just so happens to be in a wedding contract with another heir who's a part of one of the other major pillars left, NYA." Kuroka stared at Sakura with a raised eyebrow before continuing. "Questions are going to be asked, history is going to be looked into and affiliations will be cross-checked. There's not a single chance that you two get away with this without causing a storm in each faction, NYA."
Sakura was silent for a moment and before she was able to open her mouth, someone else did so for her.
She's kinda right, Sakura-chan." The familiar voice caused Sakura to glance away from her phone, spotting her sensei standing on the edge of the building, reading his dirty manga. Sakura stared at Kakashi for a moment before shrugging her shoulders. "And this could also lead to talks of peace between the yokai and devil faction. Kami knows that these two factions have been at odds for years. If I can manage to secure a direct line to the current Lucifer by helping Rias, then it's a win."
"That's if the Phoenix clan don't retaliate, NYA," Kuroka added.
"The devils would be down an extra pillar if that happened," Sakura muttered with a roll of her eyes as she scrolled through her phone. Now, we don't have to go that far." Kakashi spoke through a minor bout of chuckles. "I'm glad you're finally channeling your inner Naruto and Sasuke, but let's avoid going the Sasuke route, yeah?" Sakura rolled her eyes with a smile. "We'll see, sensei. So, mind explaining this carefully thought out plan?" And so Sakura did. After it all, Kakashi pursed his lips while sitting down on the side of the building. His eyes roamed across the small city, looking at everything and taking it all in. "Yano," he began quietly, tucking his book into one of the various pockets of his sleeved shirt. "I can see the benefits of this. I can also see the potential consequences, good and bad, of something like this." He sighed quietly, placing his fingers on the side of the building. "You always were a sucker for a sob story." Sakura rolled her eyes at the man's words. Yeah, look at me, being a good person and whatnot. I'm not only doing this for charity, Yano. If you're good at something then you never do it for free." Kakashi nodded his head at that. "On that, we most certainly agree." A bit of silence passed before Sakura spoke once more. "How goes your training?" A lopsided smile found its way to the man's face as he glanced at his student. "I sense something in you. Something draconic." An uncomfortable gleam shone in the pinket's eyes as her smile slowly grew. "So you feel it too, huh?" Her right arm slowly rose towards her face, first clenching as chakra began to surge throughout her body. Crimson energy then proceeded to manifest around her fist before swirling and then shooting down the entire length of her arm. A metal amalgamation encased itself around her flesh, fit with gnarly talon-like spikes protruding outward. A gleaming green gem shone on the back of her hand, pulsing with a sickening amount of power. Kakashi's eyes widened upon staring at the sacred gear, recognizing it almost immediately. His draconic partner stirred restlessly at the sight, roaring at the showing of power. Off pure instinct, his own sacred gear responded to the showing of power, popping out of his back. Apparently, all users of the Divine Dividing and the boosted gear are destined to fight and kill one another to prove their strength and power over the other. Sakura spoke with a smirk, glancing down at her new sacred gear. But that sounds like far too much work. I don't care about any of that. I just want to get stronger. Kakashi released a genuine chuckle as he shook his head. Who would have thought that two of the strongest sacred gears, Longinus at that, would come together under the same faction? Are we finally due our good luck? We won't have to keep looking at Naruto and Sasuke's back anymore. We can stand with them. Sakura insisted with a grin. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Kakashi spoke humbly. One step at a time. Kuroka remained silent as she stared at the two superior beings in front of her. To think that these two were incredibly powerful before attaining their sacred gears. The Shinto pantheon was now playing with some awfully terrifying pieces these days. May the gods have mercy on any unfortunate individuals who seek to target Japan and its people. Sasuke landed silently, eyes surveying his surroundings for any sign of his wayward teammate. The last time he had fully sensed the blonde was shortly after the destruction of Takamagahara. He had been convinced by Amaterasu that Naruto was surely to perish due to absorbing the unfiltered divine essence. Except he hadn't, and yet there was no sign that Naruto was here. Frustration bubbled deep within Sasuke's veins as his eyes scanned every inch of the terrain. He could see two unique sets of footprints. One of them obviously belonged to that god, but the other had clearly belonged to Naruto. Where did you go? He angrily muttered to himself, clenching his fist tightly. He's no longer here. Amaterasu mumbled lowly, slowly walking towards Sasuke. Her eyes were no longer their original silver, instead the entirety of the eye and all its features were little more than a golden glow that rivaled the sun. He's back in Japan. A unintelligent mumble left her lips as her head twitched abnormally, shifting to and fro. He's in Kyoto. No, in talk. Wait, now he's. Her mouth snapped shut as a perplexed expression painted her face. She scrunched her face up multiple times in what Sasuke perceived to be his frustration. Well, he proposed quietly, crossing his arms against his chest. A rumble of discontent slipped through the goddess's lips as her eyes returned to normal. He's completely masked his presence. In broad daylight, she released a scoff of disbelief as she turned towards the Avenger. How can he escape my gaze? The sun sees all. Sasuke shook his head quietly, eyes glancing towards the soil that Naruto had disturbed. I'm not surprised. As a child, he caused issues for our village, and if he wanted to disappear, then he had little issue doing it. Whether that be outrunning the men forced to capture him or outright smarting them. He released a quiet sigh, shaking his head as he did. If he doesn't want to be found, then he won't be, and no divine power is going to change that. Amaterasu grumbled quietly, crossing her arms against her chest like a child. Rather rude of him, don't you think? Sasuke ignored the rhetorical question from the childish woman, instead turning inward to question Naruto's sudden disappearance. He knew Naruto. Probably better than the idiot knew himself. For what reason would Naruto have fled? Shame. Sasuke scoffed at that thought. Naruto wasn't a prideful man, not like himself at least. A simple loss, of this magnitude at least, where nothing was at stake, wouldn't press Naruto. He'd be annoyed about it, and if anything, it'd push him to get stronger. It wasn't as if his friend was outclassed. He had matched Gojo pound for pound during their fight and had even managed to overwhelm the man at times. Of course, there was no telling just how powerful the man really was, but if he had survived that final attack, then he had done so using his divine form. Perhaps he was just frustrated. Naruto had been rather stressed the week leading up to this, and perhaps he needed some time to cool off. There's something you need to know, Sasuke. Amaterasu spoke aloud, interrupting the boy's thoughts. He motioned for her to speak. Naruto is no longer a human now. He is now a bona fide god, no longer the demigod he was when entering this realm. Amaterasu spoke seriously, dropping all childish acts. Whether he likes it or not, he is now the Shinto pantheon's responsibility. Whatever he does will now reflect back upon us in Japan. You must explain the severity of this situation to him. She paused for a moment, weighing her words carefully. In due time he will manifest new powers that align with his very soul. This power will then become his domain. A domain that he solely controls, including all aspects related to said subject. Whatever power that may be, he will need to control. I trust that you are capable of understanding just how severe this actually is. Sasuke was silent for a moment before simply nodding his head and turning away. Releasing a quiet sigh, he replied, I'll make sure to pass the message along. Amaterasu studied the teen for several moments before nodding her head. The Shinto pantheon thanks you. Sasuke said nothing. At the boy's silence, Amaterasu narrowed her eyes. The offer still stands, Sasuke. Mismatched eyes snapped back to the goddess, studying her and assessing her words. Join the Shinto pantheon as a god. She offered quietly, reaching out with her hand. You want to protect Japan and all its inhabitants, yes. You wish to protect your new home, Kyoto. She turned her palm to the sky, speaking earnestly. Join us. Sasuke glanced down at the woman's hand for nearly an entire minute, remaining silent and giving nothing away. And then, he spoke. You've been silent for a long time. Naruto would have rolled his eyes if they were open. Of course he wasn't talking, he was fucking angry. That's precisely why he was meditating in the first place, to get his emotions under control so he could tackle this new issue at hand. Meditating does nothing but push the issue away for a short amount of time. You are stuck like this. It is best to deal with it now rather than later, and you know that. Naruto's nose curled at Kurama's words. I'd rather be calm about it than shouting about how fucked up my life is. Every step forward is another 8 backwards. It doesn't fucking matter what I do anymore. I can't catch a break. He huffed angrily, chakra fluctuating due to his emotions. In doing so, he disturbed the peaceful surrounding he had created. The grassy terrain beneath him began to sway erratically, followed shortly by the trees bending and creaking. The wildlife that she gathered around began to scurry around anxiously, confused as to why the aura had changed so drastically. The Jinchuriki grunted quietly, getting his emotions under control. In less than a minute, the peaceful aura returned. You're acting as if the cards had ever been in your favor to begin with. The fox scoffed as it continued. Why are you allowing it to affect you now? Are you not the one who stared death in the face and said no? Where is my real container? Kurama sneered angrily, tails slamming the shared mindscape. You are not Naruto. At Kurama's words, the blonde teen winced quietly. Kurama, Matabi hissed. Apologize this instant. Several of the Biju roared in agreement with the Nibi, demanding their elder to apologize. Kurama silenced them with its roar. I will do no such thing. I will not sit here and allow the savior that our father entrusted in to wallow in self-pity. The fox's words silenced its siblings. You do not know the boy as I do. You have seen his memories, but I have lived through them. Kurama slammed its mighty tails onto the mindscape once more, nearly breaking Naruto's concentration. You all may accept this pitiful behavior, but I shall do no such thing. I expect great things from Naruto. And so did father. You would all do well to remember his words. The beast paused for a moment, allowing its words to sink. When Kurama was satisfied that it got its point across, the beast spoke once more. The Naruto I know wouldn't allow such trivial matters to truly affect him. Are you going to give up? Wallow in pity and cry? Or are you going to endure? Kurama released an annoyed huff before slowly closing its eyes and resting its giant body on the mindscape. Do not speak to me again until you've returned to yourself. No container of mine is allowed to be so weak in the face of adversity. Without so much as another word, Kurama cut off Naruto's connection to the other Biju in itself. The silence was deafening. Kurama's words had been harsh, but ultimately, the fox was right. That doesn't mean that he couldn't be angry and frustrated about the situation, but Kurama was right. He had been rather pitiful lately. His cracks were showing and the infallible persona he put on was slowly crumbling. Naruto released a quiet sigh before placing his palms together and gathering natural chakra. Meditating and accessing the energy of nature chakra always calmed him down and allowed him to think straight. Naruto allowed the energy to course through his veins, run rampant, before taming it. It seemed so effortless now. Once attaining Rakudo chakra, accessing natural chakra was merely an afterthought. But now, he didn't even need to think about absorbing the energy, balancing it with the spiritual and physical chakra. It just did. It seemed like his body was constantly absorbing and balancing the energy regardless if he willed it or not. Which in hindsight, should have been a real negative indicator. But Naruto chalked that up to being a god now. And again, the negative thoughts festered at that. Why, was it too much to ask for in just being a regular human? You aren't a regular human to begin with. No, he was not. He had never truly been one to begin with. He was an anomaly in the elemental nations. One of only a handful of individuals that were anything but human back in his own world. Perhaps he was just making a big deal out of it. This change benefited him greatly. He was basically immortal, though the problem with that was that he'd be immortal. At some point, maybe he'd just like to die. It was a morbid thought, but one that was always in the back of his mind. He had been a human. And one certainty that all humans possessed was death. You could not skirt it, and one day, it would come for you. But now, it was different. He could technically live forever. He was also way stronger now. Not that he really needed extra power to begin with. But he wasn't going to complain that much. He still couldn't detect the change in his body. He didn't necessarily feel like a god even though he technically was one. It was strange. He still felt the same. Perhaps a little more alert, but other than that, nothing. Hours came and went as Naruto continued to meditate. Hundreds of thoughts and topics came and went as he effortlessly and mindlessly balanced the nature chakra. He had felt the life forces of various individuals that called Japan their home. He could even tell if they were old, young, healthy, and sick. He had theorized early on that if he actively chose to, he could even connect with the person's life force. It had been an interesting experience to say the least. Connecting with the person's life force had inadvertently caused him to connect to them. Which made sense. An individual's spirit was tied to their life force, and connecting to it would merit the ability of understanding them. It was almost like a simpler version of Ninshu, where all he had to do was reach out with his chakra using nature energy chakra. The similarities stopped there because he had found that while he could see their entire spirit, they could not see his. Whereas Ninshu allowed both individuals to connect with one another using their spiritual energy, this new ability allowed him to see their entire spirit. It was also a bit too invasive for his tastes. It was incredibly rude to just intrude upon someone's thoughts and experiences, so he'd just keep this to himself. Naruto was idly experiencing with his new ability when he felt eyes on him. He slowly opened his eyes, coming quite literally face to face with a woman. Or rather, a tree. That resembled a woman, maybe a plant, perhaps it was a woman that was covered head to toe in grass. His head tilted and subconsciously, his chakra filtered out to prod at the unknown woman's energy, assessing whether or not she was a threat. He almost wished he hadn't. Hundreds, thousands, millions. No billions, maybe even trillions of stimuli assaulted his senses. Memories upon memories upon memories of sights, people, events, and creatures exploded in his mind. Gods he recognized from his own research came and went, creatures and animals he had never seen appeared and disappeared, flowing in and out of his brain like a river. Naruto witnessed the barren earth, untouched and unblemished by humanity. He saw the rise of the gods and their kin. Saw the downfall of these very same gods. He witnessed the birth of new gods. Mighty beings that rivaled the very stars in the galaxy. He witnessed the birth of evil itself and how it encapsulated the world, felling it and birthing it anew.
He saw things he could not comprehend, and when Naruto thought he'd see no more, he saw himself.
His vision exploded as a cacophony of white noise assaulted his senses.
Are you feeling well, young one? Naruto blinked abruptly, coming face to face with the woman from earlier. Only now, she was looking down at him, hovering over his face with motherly concern. Motherly, huh? The woman certainly gave off that vibe. Naruto groaned quietly, massaging his temples as he spoke. What happened? An amused smile came over the woman's face, like a parent who caught their child doing something they shouldn't be doing. You unknowingly connected with me. The grassy woman tilted her head, continuing in that gentle tone. You should heed caution when doing so. It can be dangerous. You might just connect to something you don't truly comprehend, child. Naruto continued to rub his temples before slowly raising his upper body up. Yeah. In hindsight, terrible idea. The woman made of grass, sticks, and leaves only smiled. Ah, but you don't plan ahead often, do you, Naruto Uzumaki? The blonde Jinchuriki chuckled at the woman's words. Well, you'd be. He abruptly stopped speaking, choosing instead to stare directly into the woman's eyes. How do you know my name? Again, the woman only seemed amused at his question. I know many things, my dear child. She slowly lifted one of her grass-covered arms, placing her hand upon his cheek. Things that you, now, have seen. Naruto's silver eyes fell to the woman's hand upon his cheek. He sensed no ill intent from the woman, and again, that motherly vibe struck home.
Who was? He knew. Gaia. He spoke, as if possessed by some unknown force. Mother Nature. The physical embodiment of the earth. The first primordial god to exist. The mother who fostered all life. The woman, Gaia, just smiled softly at Naruto's words, waving off his words. I've been known to occasionally go by Terra as well. A sly smile overtook that soft one as she continued. I'm no god these days, my child. Just a mother, caring for her children. Naruto stared at the primordial being for several seconds before shaking his head. His mouth opened and closed several times, questions warring against one another as he stared at what was possibly the most oldest being in existence. Why are you here? He questioned with furrowed eyebrows. Gaia relinquished her gentle hold on the boy and instead swiveled her head around the area they sat in. Trees as tall as skyscrapers swayed to and fro, towering for all of the world to see. Thousands of flowers, all unique in color and species, swayed gently to and fro, blossoming beautifully around the landscape. Hundreds of different animals frolicked around the terrain, completely at ease with one another despite the natural order. Life itself was all around them. The primordial being turned her gaze back to the boy, speaking softly. You called me here. I should be the one questioning you, Naruto. Naruto finally deigned a glance around his surroundings and was shocked to see the overabundance of flowers, trees and animals. He had done this. But I don't remember doing this. He more so asked than stated. Mother Nature herself chuckled quietly at the boy's words. It would seem so. Gaia slowly rose to her feet and due to this, Naruto was finally able to get a good look at the primordial. And make it no secret, this was very much so a woman. Naruto lowered his gaze upon noticing the woman's second pair of lips and decided to forget it ever happened. He didn't want to entertain any of these thoughts. Not a single one. Humanity. Gaia chuckled quietly upon noticing the boy's reluctance to look at her. It is amusing to see humans react to stimuli they themselves impose. Naruto shook his head quietly, replying to the woman. It's a respect thing.
Another chuckle from the embodiment of Earth. Modesty. An interesting restriction to place upon oneself. Though, in the grand scheme of life, it is rather small, no? Life is naked itself, completely bare for all to see. You make good points, excellent ones even, however I'm still not looking. Naruto replied with a shrug of the shoulders. My dear child, what a gentleman you are. Gaia quietly hummed as she altered her form, masking the feminine anatomy of her body. Come, walk with me. Naruto took a cursory peek at the woman before nodding his head and standing to his feet. His gaze idly swiveled around the terrain, still slightly in awe that he had done this without even thinking.
Was this due to him being a god now? Most likely. He hadn't been able to affect the actual environment while meditating back then. Yes, he could definitely affect the aura of an area but the actual environment itself. This was completely new. Naruto took a few steps towards the primordial, standing side by side and allowing the woman to lead. She sauntered off without another word, slowly maneuvering through the terrain.
With each step she took, Naruto noticed that the very environment itself bent and swayed around her. Life seemed to move around them and Naruto had no words for the phenomenon occurring around him. This awes you? Gaia spoke softly, running her fingers along the bark of a passing tree.
Naruto glanced at the woman, watching as a flower nearly twice his size swayed just out of his reach. It's unique. Nature was something I connected with early on in my life. I guess that's why it resonates with me so easily. Gaia stroked a passing deer, smiling as it nuzzled her palm. Yes, I can feel your connection quite easily. It is a surprise considering your lineage. The Jinchuriki glanced at the woman out the corner of his eyes while replying. What exactly do you mean by that? You are a descendant from a being that came from the stars, yes. Gaia answered easily. Conquering warmongers that eat the mountains and swallow the seas, accruing power to one day become a primordial themselves. The woman turned her gaze on the teen, taking note of his rather serious expression.
A sympathetic smile reached her face as she spoke softly. You are not the first of your kind to arrive on Earth, however, you will surely be the last. That hurt more than Naruto would have liked. It wasn't as if it was some secret or something he hadn't expected. The elemental nations no longer existed. The planet was destroyed and with it, the life it had once fostered. To have a primordial confirm the existence of the Otsutsuki, however, was less than pleasing. Naruto glanced away for a moment, narrowing his eyes as he did. How much do you know about the Otsutsuki race? Mother Nature waved her hands, willing the forest to bend to her will. The scenery changed dramatically, in place of the barren wasteland was something akin to that of a mirror. Is this? Naruto questioned with raised eyebrows, staring at the mirage-like scene in front of him. Gaia merely offered a smile. I am as old as this planet. So long as this planet stands, I too, shall stand. What lives for so long, watches. And what Earth has seen, I too, have witnessed. The primordial waved her arm and an almost water-like illusion began to play. Mountainous vegetation encompassed the land, twisting to and fro, like a voracious animal. And in the middle of it all, was a tree that dwarfed the environment it stood in. It towered over everything in its vicinity, reaching into the very stars itself. Its trunk was wider than any mountain around and its roots thicker than the very terrain it sat upon. Naruto's mouth slowly opened as he stared at the giant tree through the illusion. That's a Shinju. Gaia hummed quietly as she replied. A god tree. An amused smile painted her features. Such arrogance. Their pride knows no bounds. Relying on artificial medicine, extracted from the life of the planet it's planted on.
Naruto did not like the smile on Gaia's face, it made his skin crawl. He cleared his throat to alleviate the uncomfortable atmosphere. How did this even get here?
I allowed them to plant it. She answered easily, waving her hand and changing the illusion being shown. The image twisted and churned before revealing Gaia, albeit far different looking, speaking to two unique humanoid beings. Both individuals shared ashen white skin with white, pupil-less eyes and animal-like horns atop their head. Gaia tilted her head as she stared at the image. Earth had not been more than a few centuries old when they came. This planet was I, and I, this planet. When she cried, I cried. Her pain was my pain, and my pain, hers. She waved her fingers and the image swirled once again, revealing a severed Shinju, cut directly at the base with the chakra fruit crushed between her hands. A young primordial I was, not quite as versed as I am now. Gaia pauses for a moment, seemingly pondering her next words. I forced them to leave and demanded they never return. She waved her hand once more, revealing a new image. One that was full of destruction and ash. Where miles upon miles of beautiful vegetation once laid, was now nothing more than a barren wasteland.
They did not, she continued, smile gone from her face. I made them.
Naruto stared at the image in silence, frowning as he did. The image shuddered for a moment before melting away, disappearing and revealing the previous forest he had grown accustomed to on his walk with Mother Nature. Glancing at the woman, Naruto spoke. How strong are you? To force not one but two Otsutsuki off the planet was incredible. Team 7 had struggled against just one and barely won due to her being inexperienced in combat.
Gaia turned towards the teen, staring at him with that tender smile. As strong as I need to be to protect that which I love, my dear child. Never had Naruto resonated more with a statement than right now. Fighting for his friends and loved ones was practically his entire personality, almost annoyingly so. He couldn't help that he was a selfless person. Do you think they'll come back? Naruto asked with furrowed brows, crossing his arms against his chest. It is always a possibility. She answered simply. Though they would need an army this time around. We have only become more powerful.
That helped to alleviate the previous stress and anxiety from finding out that the Otsutsuki were present here in this world as well.
A comfortable silence settled in the forest as Naruto and Gaia continued their unknown journey. It was an amicable silence, one that didn't bother Naruto. However, he still had one more question for the primordial.
Why did you really find me? He asked curiously.
I take it upon myself to visit those who possess abilities surrounding life. Her vine-like hair swayed in the wind as she parted the forest, forcing the wildlife to regress and disappear. Life is important. It is eternal, a cycle. But just as life is important, so too is death. For life to live, something must perish. It is an equivalent exchange, one that cannot be avoided. The primordial briefly paused, glancing towards the young god before her. You are now a fledgling god, one with an ability that affects life itself. Her eyes, while soft, held a hardened gleam to them. Ensure that this gift is used correctly. Naruto noted the heavy emphasis on the word, gift. There is a fine balance between life and death. It would do you well to not cross it, my dear child. The new god nodded his head whilst replying. Noted. A pause. When you mean ability, do you mean domain? Gods get those right, where they rule over some area or thing. Gaia merely smiled at the boy, not answering his question. Farewell, dear child. Do visit me sometime, yes. My children rarely do so and it does get terribly lonely. As she bid her farewell, the primordial began to sink into the ground, melding together seamlessly. Well, how do I do that? Naruto questioned, watching as Mother Nature sunk into the earth. How indeed? She teased softly, amused smile painting her face. I believe in you, my dear child. The new god grimaced lightly at that, watching the primordial completely disappear. Well, that didn't really help. Earth was so different from above, Naruto mused quietly to himself. Silver orbs trailed along the landscape, admiring the untouched vegetation from the heavens above. Had the elemental nations looked just like this? He'd never know, but he liked to believe it did, sans for the technological advances on this planet. His world had been so primitive compared to Earth, though that was likely due to century-long wars between superpowered humans who could shoot fire and wield water. It was unfair to compare the elemental nations to Earth, considering this planet was quite literally billions of years old. He didn't have a definitive estimation of the elemental nations, but the oldest stories had always been about the rabbit goddess, Kagaya, and the sage of six paths. His world was likely older than that of Kagaya, but no records had existed of it, unlike Earth. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted as a slight trickle of unknown energy coursed over his body. It came just as fast as it went, causing a frown to form on his face. That felt a lot like a barrier. Looks like he finally breached the Greek pantheon's borders. What was he doing on Greek soil? The answer was rather obvious. He was searching for more information on Gaia, and what better way to do so than the pantheon that had claimed her? Though, that seemed to be a rather gray point when it came to the Greeks' mythology and pantheon. Gaia did not hold allegiance to any pantheon if her own words had rang true. However, much of the woman's history ran deep in the Greek mythology due to the fact that the Greek pantheon was one of the oldest pantheons to exist. Christianity and the biblical God notwithstanding. He didn't understand it, considering that the woman was quite literally the earth and the earth was, well, her. Naruto wasn't a historian, so the information kind of just came and went. If it didn't involve fighting in martial arts, he'd offer the bare minimum to it and felt no shame in admitting that. That would soon have to change considering recent events. Events that he was still bitter about. Just a few days ago, he'd been living a fairly decent life. As decent as one could be when faced with the fact that their old way of life, and world, had ceased to exist due to circumstances out of their control. It was as harrowing as it was terrifying. A can of worms he'd crept around since coming to this world. On occasion he'd find himself opening up to Yusaka and venting about his feelings. The feelings of guilt that'd rise immediately after complaining and spitting about how this new world was so different to his own. Yusaka would bear it all with a sympathetic smile despite not truly comprehending the pain of losing one's home. That guilt would encapsulate him, ensnare him, and turn to self-loathing. He'd spit vitriol about a world he didn't understand due to unforeseen events. Earth didn't deserve his ire, and he certainly didn't wish for Yusaka to shoulder the brunt of his misgivings. She was a kind woman, but one couldn't ignore the obvious machinations she was plotting. As if such things would actually bother him, he mused with a tired sigh. He knew Yusaka hadn't accepted Team 7 out of the good of her heart, though she likely would have regardless. Team 7 presented a fundamental problem in Japan. He and his team were far too powerful to be overlooked. Strangers to a world that was clueless of their existence allowed Yusaka leeway to snag them. It was all politics at the end of the day, and while Team 7 didn't care for things as trivial as power creep, they knew a good deal when they saw one. It wasn't as if they didn't benefit from the exchange. But that was another problem for another day. Naruto's dilemma was with Yusaka and her attempts to court him. The woman wasn't subtle with her actions, not that she was even trying to be. Kakashi had made sure that that was something they talked about during their heart-to-heart after he had taken his first life. This world wasn't all that different than his own, he supposed. Power was all that mattered at the end of the day. Religions with more followers and believers were stronger than those without. Gods with powerful domains and exponential strength ruled their territory and dictated the lives of the mortals they ruled over. There were, of course, outliers in this. Individuals like himself who possessed no followers or believers, bound to a relatively small but incredibly old pantheon, with power that eclipsed even the primordials that existed in said pantheon. And now he was even stronger due to his ascension. Naruto glanced down at both of his hands, staring at the sun and moon marks that were etched into the base of his palms. The 6 paths yin and yang power. Naruto clenched his fists tightly, ignoring the blood that began to sleep through his fingers. Though he lacked the eyes of the sage and all the abilities granted to a Rinnegan user, he was now Hagoromo's rival. A tough and bitter pill to swallow. Like a spiked pill did it tear through his orifice, gouging the muscle of his throat. He didn't ask for this power. He didn't even want this power. All this off the back of an exiled god who claimed to hold no ill will. Naruto shook his head, ignoring the acidic voices that plagued his thoughts. They spat and raged, arguing that he deserved this strength. He'd argue otherwise. No one deserved anything in life. Entitlement was a delusion built on self-centeredness. You were no more important than your neighbor, and yet despite this, those very same arrogant and entitled individuals ruled the world. Naruto didn't want to be like those men and women. The title of God, and all its glory, meant nothing to him. He didn't go to Takamagahara to become a Shinto god, nor had that been his original intention. He had fought Gojo purely in self-defense. It just happened to be that due to his unique genes and DNA, that he was even able to absorb the divine essence and survive. But hadn't survived, had he? He scoffed at the thought while shaking his head. He had found out early on that he no longer possessed a human body. While his soul had been strong enough to weather the onslaught of power granted by the divine essence, his physical body hadn't. He was no longer a demigod, not that he had believed he was one to begin with. He was now a full-fledged god and nothing could change that. If there was a way to get rid of this predicament, then perhaps he'd look into it. His musings ground to a halt upon sensing something ancient and powerful manifesting just a few kilometers away. Interesting. He hadn't sensed anything aside from humans and wildlife upon entering the territory of the Olympians. Which meant that the gods lived in a separate dimension similar to the one that the Shinto gods who claimed Takamagahara. Naruto slowly came to a stop upon spotting what appeared to be a woman floating in the sky. He slowly made his way toward the woman, taking in her features as he did so. This woman, who he briefly recognized from his visions through Gaia, wore armor similar to that of the Greek Spartans. A glowing, golden chest plate protected her body, sprawling with boons and unknown jewels that shone brightly in the rays of the sun. In her left hand sat a simple golden shield with no unique or distinguishing features. In her right hand she held a small golden goblet that possessed several unique insignia and etchings. She appeared to hold no weapon on her person, but Naruto highly doubted that to be the case. The woman's ebony skin contrasted rather nicely with her snow-white hair, that which was bound into a single long braid that hung over her left shoulder. Upon her crown sat a unique helmet that mimicked her long braid of hair, gliding down her spine. Athena, Naruto found himself saying, coming to a stop nearly 10 meters away from the beautiful goddess. Olympian goddess of wisdom and warfare. The woman, Athena, tilted her head, eyes tightening at Naruto's words. The goddess stood quietly as she racked her brain, quickly trying to identify the god that stood before her. Hundreds upon thousands of thoughts quickly sifted through her mind before ultimately disbanding the notion. She didn't recognize this man despite the vast amount of knowledge she beheld. It appears that you know of I, and yet, I possess no knowledge of you, stranger. Her voice was a calm staccato, nearly flat in that regard, as she spoke. Who are you, child of Izanagi? A frown marred Naruto's face at the woman's question. She knew he was associated with the Shinto pantheon despite not recognizing him. Were gods not the same in that regard? Did all gods possess different types of divine essence? But she didn't feel any different than he did. How had she distinguished his presence so easily? Naruto. He answered easily, slowly placing his hands into his pockets. Naruto Uzumaki. He watched, intrigued as Athena's eyes rapidly blinked. After a second or two, she tilted her head before speaking. I possess no knowledge of a Shinto god named Naruto. How interesting. Naruto's frown only grew deeper at the woman's words. How did you know I was even a Shinto god? He asked with furrowed eyebrows. I did not. I merely assumed. Your state of dress is similar to that of feudal Japan royalty. Had it not been for your attire, I would have assumed you to be of Christian origin, at least biblically so. Your hair color is uncommon in the Shinto pantheon. Naruto's frown remained as he stared at the woman. She could see through his genjutsu. He had conjured the appearance before ascending when he flew through the borders, donning his old hoodie and joggers before his ascension into godhood. Was genjutsu useless? Or was something else at play? How could she see his white robes but not his white hair? So, you can see through me? Naruto found himself asking, curious as to why his genjutsu wasn't working. You speak to the goddess of wisdom. All I needed was your name. She replied easily. Naruto was silent for a few seconds, staring at the armored woman curiously. Goddess of wisdom, curious. Did her domain work through the knowledge of others or was it innate? He'd bet on it being the former over the latter. She knew what he looked like before the ascension, not as he did now. Which meant that she only knew what others knew. It must be how her domain worked considering she was the goddess of wisdom. But what were the limits then? She knew what he looked like as a human but not as a god. Was her domain limited to information that only others knew? Did it work off what others believed to be true? What he looked like and what his name was had been rather public knowledge in Kyoto. However, now that he was a god, no one truly knew what he looked like. And neither did Sasuke or Amaterasu for that matter. How much do you know of me then? He asked curiously. Athena seemed to ponder the question, debating whether or not to answer. Only what is public knowledge presented as fact. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the response, not expecting the woman to reveal something that could be used against her. So, you know the bare minimum. Only my name, then. Athena merely nodded her head, shifting her golden goblet. Well, that answered that he supposed. It also meant that, in theory, anyone could manipulate knowledge about themselves using the public eye to misdirect information. How interesting. Was Athena arrogant, or did she not care? He didn't know much about the woman, aside from the bare information provided by the humans who followed these religions and beliefs. Athena was stated to be an incredibly intelligent and petty woman. A war strategist like no other, stated to be one hell of a fighter, matching even her brother Ares, the god of war, in combat. What is a new blood doing skulking around the borders of the Olympians? Athena questioned curiously, golden irises flicking up and down. I cannot recall any meetings or visits concerning the Shinto gods. Why have you come to us? Down to business, huh? Naruto couldn't really blame her. He got the distinct impression that gods from different myths preferred to be left well alone. I'm looking for information on Gaia. He answered honestly. I figured that the best place to start would be where she is most known. The Olympian goddess was silent for several moments, seemingly mulling over the answer in her head. You have, thus far, been amicable. I've sensed nothing but honesty from you thus far, however. She trailed off for a few moments before standing tall, squaring her shoulders like the Spartans they ruled over. I deny you entry into our lands. A perplexed expression made its way upon Naruto's face as he stared at the goddess. Is there any way I could convince you otherwise? I really need this information. The goddess stood silent, expression giving nothing away as she idly stirred her golden goblet. Perhaps. She lulled quietly, eyes gazing upon him like a puzzle that needed solving. I could be convinced too. She paused for a moment while glancing at her goblet, swirling the liquid inside it. Overlook your location. Naruto pursed his lips at the woman. And what do you want in return? Athena merely smiled, attention returning to the newly fledged god. Come now, child, what do you believe I wish for? Information, probably. At least he'd assume so. The goddess seemed to highly value knowledge, and with her domain, he'd expect nothing less. Naruto sighed quietly as he shifted his weight lazily. What do y'all wanna know? Athena began to laugh, a soft titter that slowly grew in volume. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed in confusion at the woman's reaction, not understanding what was amusing about his question. The goddess must have caught a glimpse of his expression because her laughter slowly dissipated. The ebony-skinned woman twirled her wrist, causing the golden goblet to vanish in a golden flash. I possess plenty of information, dear child. She shook her head with an amused smile, stroking her chin with half-lidded eyes. No. What I want is to visit Japan, the home of the Shinto pantheon. Naruto slowly blinked at the answer, not understanding why that request seemed to be such a big deal to the goddess. That's it. That's all you want. Athena cocked her head with a raised eyebrow. Dear child, were you born yesterday? Technically, yes, but she didn't need to know that. Entry to another pantheon's home turf, as a guest, is considered a very high honor. It is incredibly rare for gods of different pantheons to mingle and interact with one another. Naruto shrugged his shoulders casually, understanding the logic behind it despite not agreeing with it. I'm sure I could work something out, he stated flippantly, as if it wasn't an incredibly huge ordeal. Athena rose a disbelieving eyebrow at his words. You can. And how exactly can you accomplish that? Child, I don't even know who you are. Oh, but she would. The entire world would soon enough. It was only a matter of time. Naruto merely smirked at her. Let's just say that I'm an important asset in the Shinto pantheon, Now, do have a deal. And how do I know that I can trust you to uphold your end of the bargain? Athena proposed with a raised brow. What would it take from me to convince you? He asked instead. Athena replied without pause, eyes staring directly into his. Sever one of your fingers. The blonde god blinked at the request before glancing down at his hand. He stared at his fingers for a moment before shrugging and manifesting a kunai out of thin air. Do you have a preference for which one? The ebony-skinned Olympian narrowed her eyes at the question. The ring finger. Naruto shrugged his shoulders before placing the weapon against his hand and slicing off his ring finger without hesitation. He purposely blocked his healing factor, allowing the blood to flow freely before turning back to Athena with a raised eyebrow. Athena possessed an impressed expression upon her face, seemingly eyeing the blonde god with a newfound respect. Impressive. I merely wished to test your conviction. Naruto shrugged at the woman before tossing his severed finger towards her. The woman snatched it out of the air a moment later, hiding her slight disgust at having to pocket the digit. I've done worse for things I've believed in. He replied easily. This is rather small, all things considered. Ah, but what if all of this is a trap and I only wish to kill off an intruder? The goddess questioned with a narrowed gaze. Naruto offered a small smile at her words. Then you'd fail, he responded firmly. Athena studied the man for several moments, pursing her lips as she replied. So much confidence. Or perhaps, is it arrogance? Never in my life have I ever considered myself to be arrogant. I say what I say with full confidence. He shrugged lazily before slowly making his way closer to the goddess. But I'm always down to prove someone wrong. The woman's golden eyes flicked up and down, assessing Naruto's worth. She was silent for but a moment before slowly shaking her head. That will not be necessary. I will merely take your word for it. Athena twirled her right hand, causing the shield in her grasp to disappear into golden specks of light. She waved her hands in the air, manifesting a golden portal. Come, I shall be your guide in Olympus. She gestured with her free hand, nodding her head. Be sure to not stray far. My family can be such a handful. Naruto absent-mindedly nodded. Whatever you say. The newly fledged god proceeded through the portal a second later, shortly followed by the goddess of wisdom. You guys fight as a cohesive unit, covering each other's weakness rather well. Sakura complimented, fists resting upon her hips. But against overwhelming power, it means nothing. The entirety of Rias Peerage, along with the woman herself, were all sprawled about on the dirt, slick with sweat and grime. You call this training? Rias responded in an exhausted and bewildered tone. The only thing I learned today is what color my vomit looks like after I've been punched through a wall. Ah, but you learned something, did you not? The pink kid responded with a cheeky smile. The best kind of training is the kind that not only physically kills you, but mentally kills you as well. You think you can just gain power without experiencing a little pain. Kakashi watched over the group from a nearby rooftop, idly reading his pornographic literature. Naruto seemed to have little issue with that. He said absent-mindedly. Sakura tutted quietly, rolling her eyes. You've seen firsthand how hard he worked himself in Konoha. You don't even believe what you just said. You're absolutely correct. The Jonin agreed without hesitation. But it would be remiss of me to compliment my students. Any self-respecting sensei worth their salt knows how dangerous an ego can be. Again, the pink-haired teen rolled her eyes. Muttering under her breath, she focused her gaze back on the defeated peerage. Yeah, and look how Sasuke ended up. I heard that, and I don't give a fuck. Your words, they cut me deep, Sakura-chan. You're so annoying. An eye smile was all she received. One that made her want to just sock him in his stupid face. A quiet set of groans emanated from the ground, causing Sakura to direct her attention back to the devils. Come on now. Resting time is over. Let's get back to it. The entirety of Rias Peerage shared a single, collective thought at the woman's words. She's a fucking monster. How does it feel being a teacher? Sakura glanced at her former sensei, watching as he lazed about in the apartment they were currently sharing. Shrugging her shoulders lazily, the teen proceeded to take her shirt off, throwing it into a nearby hamper. Honestly, it's pretty fun. I get to beat the shit out of people for several hours. She let out a chuckle, reaching for the hems of her tights before pulling them down, exposing her lower body. I can kinda see why some Jonins decided to take on genin early on in their careers. Kakashi ignored his student as she changed out of her clothing. He chuckled quietly as he turned a page in his book. Bullying you three was the highlight of my day. The medic rolled her eyes as she waltzed through the room, reaching one of the various dressers. She rummaged through the furniture, picking out some fresh clothes. Must have been a boring life, Kakai-sensei. Sakura teased with a smile before glancing towards the man curiously. How come you never dated in Konoha? The masked Jonin was silent as he processed the question. He ignored his arrow manga for a minute or two before answering blandly. Honestly, I figured I'd have been dead at that point in my life. A relationship, it just didn't feel right for me. He was quiet for a moment before continuing. The only thing that kept me going after the Anbu was you three. Sakura ignored her clothes for the time being, hearing the subdued tone from the man she viewed as a second father. A small frown marred her face as she replied. What about now? Kakashi sighed quietly, closing his eyes and shutting his book. He tucked the book into one of his pockets before replying. Now, he released a self-deprecating laugh. I wouldn't even know where to start with that, Sakura. Shinobi don't date. We're not shinobi anymore, sensei. Sakura refuted with a frown. We can put the blade down and relax our shoulders. Kakashi understood what his student was saying but felt the need to respond with his opinion anyway. A blade's only useful if it's sharp, Sakura. Old habits die hard, I suppose. The medic sported a conflicted expression on her face. She wanted nothing more than to continue talking about this with Kakashi, but she also understood that being a shinobi was Kakashi's entire life. It was the only thing he knew how to do. He was raised in war. Trained to be an assassin. A blade capable of cutting through battalions of men and women. Kakashi must have been feeling out of place now. It made sense as to why he had accepted being a contract killer in this new world. It was the only thing he knew. Sakura's frown only grew deeper before she gathered her garments. I'm sorry, sensei. The Jonin opened his eyes for a moment, staring at the ceiling. There's nothing to apologize for, Sakura. It's my burden to bear. No, it isn't, she denied vehemently, shaking her head fiercely. Team 7 has always been a family. And I'm not going to sit by and watch someone I love suffer silently. She glared at the man, ignoring his surprised expression. She was quiet for a moment before taking a breath to calm herself. We're all we got left. She croaked quietly, emerald eyes falling to the floor of the apartment. I don't want to lose you guys. Kakashi remained silent as he stared at his former student. He shifted his position on the couch before speaking. Yeah, neither do I, kid. Sakura's eyes returned to the man, watching as he stared at his hands. A few steps brought her towards the man as she took a seat on the couch. We're broken, huh? She questioned with a crooked smile. The Jonin merely offered a sad smile, one that was hidden by the surgical mask upon his face. Yeah, just a little. The displaced shinobi sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before Sakura's phone began to ring. With a tired sigh, the woman reached for the device before answering it. Sasuke, what's up? Wait, what do you mean by Naruto's? Where are you? He did what? Can you find him? I didn't fucking ask for your opinion. Can you find him or not? You find him or I'm sending you to the moon. Do you understand me? Sakura hung up the phone a moment later, calmly placing the item in the coffee table. Her breathing leveled out for a moment before her fist abruptly shattered the table, sending microscopic splinters of wood everywhere. Kakashi grimaced at the display. I take it something happened with Naruto. The medic released an aggravated sigh, rubbing her face with her hands. Sasuke told me that Naruto disappeared after a fight broke out in Takamagahara. Some prick named Gojo or something attacked Naruto. One thing to another, and apparently, Naruto is a deity now. Kakashi slowly blinked at the woman's words, recognizing the name of the individual who had attacked Naruto. He shook his head quietly as he responded. And the bad news? Sakura released an annoyed grunt as she stood to her feet, gathering her clothes. Amaterasu says that Naruto was last seen entering the Greek pantheon. Which isn't good because according to Sasuke, the Greek pantheon and the Shinto pantheon don't exactly see eye to eye. On top of that, he hasn't been able to establish contact with Naruto since he left Takamagahara. Kakashi sighed quietly. This is not ideal. I hope that idiot knows what he's doing. Sakura stated frustratedly. Before she could rant and rave, her phone rung once more. Glancing towards the caller ID caused a grimace to form on her face. Rubbing her face, Sakura answered the phone with a faux smile. Yusaka-sama, hey, how are you? No, I haven't heard from Naruto. She feigned ignorance. Really? Well, that's the first I've heard of this. Sakura turned towards her sensei before mouthing quietly. She's not happy. Honestly, I wouldn't worry too much, Yusaka-sama. Again, she mouthed to Kakashi quietly. She should be worrying a lot. Oh me, oh, ya know, everything's actually going pretty well down here. Solved some issues, established some borders. Ya know, another quiet mouthing, might probably start a war with the devils if we're not careful. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. You got it. Bye-bye, Yusaka-sama. Sakura ended the call with a fake smile before turning towards Kakashi. Welp, we're fucked. The Jonin only grimaced at her words. Fucked indeed. An aggravated sigh escaped Sasuke's lips as he pocketed his cell phone. He stood atop one of the various buildings in Kyoto, eyes staring down at nothing in particular. The Uchiha muttered quietly to himself, fingers curling around his tanto. Why must you make things so difficult, Naruto? I didn't ask for this. If Sasuke was surprised by the sudden voice, then he did precious little to show so. He continued to stare down at the city of Kyoto before replying. And yet, you ran away. He released a quiet sigh before shifting on his feet, turning towards the clone of Naruto with a frown. When are you going to stop running? If Sasuke's words angered the clone, then it hit it well. The clone only rolled its eyes before closing the distance. The boss needed some time alone. Took him a while to even bother accepting what had happened. Sasuke said nothing as he turned back towards the city, gazing down upon it with a blank expression. Sakura demanded I track you down. The clone smiled at the statement. Always the worrier. I'm inclined to do just that. Naruto glanced at his wayward brother before shrugging. Last message I got was that the boss was tracking down information about Gaia. He's on MT Olympus with the Greek gods. Sasuke leaned over the edge of the building, resting his elbows on the concrete slab. If that idiot causes a war, I'm sure it'll all work out. The clone waved off calmly as it joined Sasuke in resting against the edge of the building. The clone's silver eyes flashed as it glanced towards Sasuke. What I wanna know is why did you take the offer? The Uchiha finally deigned a solid glance at the clone of Naruto, revealing a pair of Rinnegan in each socket with both of the Rinnegan sporting several tomo. The new god glanced away, tutting to itself quietly. My reason isn't important. What truly matters is that you're no longer alone. Stop running from your problems and come back. Naruto sighed to himself as he hung his head. I can't make that call. You know how the boss is, Sasuke. Whatever he's looking for, he won't find with those gods. Yeah, and how do you know that? Sasuke shook his head with a quiet sigh, as if talking to a child. No primordial allies itself with a pantheon it could destroy with little issue. Whatever information they possess isn't going to help you. There's other means of tracking down an entity that's one with nature. Like, I don't know Naruto, perhaps using senjutsu. Or has becoming a god rotted the little intelligence you already possessed? Ya think the boss hasn't already tried that? The clone questioned loudly. Yes, actually, I do. Sasuke answered without hesitation. The clone opened its mouth to refute Sasuke's words but then closed it a second later. That's fair. I'll give you that one. Sasuke merely rolled his eyes. But it doesn't matter. We're gaining information. Ya know, information that we don't have. We have other means of attaining this information. I'm all ears then, Sasuke. The clone answered simply. If you have a better plan then I'd love to relay it to the boss. But he didn't. The new god shook his head quietly before responding. Don't do anything fucking stupid. We have enough issues already without you potentially causing a war with the Greek pantheon. They have some serious firepower. Ah, the clone cooed in an annoying manner. Worried bout whittle ol' me. The clone of Naruto proceeded to erupt in a curtain of black flames, burning away and popping due to the flames of Amaterasu. Fucking idiot. Sasuke murmured quietly before disappearing in a burst of speed. 2 weeks passed by in the blink of an eye and Sakura had heard nothing about Naruto from Sasuke. She was starting to get just a little aggravated, and could she be blamed? You okay, Sakura? Rias asked with a concerned frown. You've been kinda tense lately. Their training session had ended a couple hours ago. Her, alongside her peerage, had been decimated for what felt like the 5,000th time. Sakura was a beast when fighting. She hit hard, she was fast, and she could heal any damage she took. It was completely unfair. And don't get Rias started on the woman's sacred gear. How the fuck do you deal with someone like Sakura? She was already physically the strongest person Rias had ever met, and the fact she possessed the boosted gear was just the icing on top of the cake. Lately though, Sakura had been rather tense and aggravated, so their recent training sessions were particularly brutal. Not that Rias and her peerage necessarily minded. But Sakura was going out of her way to help, and Rias would be damned if she let the issue fester. Sakura began quietly, eyes narrowing as she stared at nothing. Something going on that involves Naruto, and I haven't heard back from Sasuke about it. I'm just worried is all. Nothing bad, I hope. The red-haired Grimoire questioned with a frown. She slowly stood from her desk before making her way over to Sakura and taking a seat beside her. If there's anything I can do to help then please let me know. Rias unknowingly shifted closer to the medic, brushing up against the woman. Emerald eyes glanced towards the crimson-haired princess. A feeling of gratitude spurred in Sakura's chest at the girl's words. Sakura and Rias had been spending a lot of time together these past few weeks. They were nearly conjoined at the hip, brushing up on their fake relationship and providing fake details in various scenarios should the need arise for it. Sakura enjoyed being in the presence of Rias. The girl had provided a level of comfort that Sakura didn't think she needed. Her shoulders were less tense and she often found herself fighting a smile when thinking about the devil. It was different. Sakura leaned her head against the couch while closing her eyes. I appreciate the concern, Rias. Thank you. I'm sure I'll hear something soon though. Rias pursed her lips for a moment before nodding her head. In an unprovoked action, Rias proceeded to lay her hand stop Sakura's thigh, gently caressing it. Sakura's eyes snapped towards the devil's hand, eyeing the appendage with slight surprise. Her eyes flicked up to Ria's face and was even more surprised to note that the devil didn't even seem to realize what she was doing. The former shinobi was loath to remove the appendage and so, she merely shrugged her shoulders and closed her eyes. What she missed, however, was the sly smile that Rias now sported. The two women were content in the silence, basking in the other's presence and keeping to themselves. It was the scene that Rias and Sona's peerage came to when entering the room. Fu. Akino giggled with half-lidded eyes. If I didn't know any better Bushu, then I'd say that you two were actually together. While Ria's cheeks painted a cherubic red, Sakura ignored the woman's teasing with ease. She noticed that Ria's hand was no longer caressing her thigh and it only slightly annoyed her. Sakura chose to ignore what was going on in the background and merely rested her head against her hand, propping it up on the arm of the couch. An hour or so passed by before Sakura caught the distinct smell of fire and ash. Her eyes snapped open and not a second later did an unknown sigil appear on the floor of the clubroom. The medic's emerald orb centered directly on the blonde man that appeared, completely ignoring the 15 women that also appeared with the man. So, this was Riser Phoenix. She flicked her gaze downwards before returning to the man's face. He was a handsome man, Sakura could admit that, but superficial beauty meant nothing if you were rotten inside. And this man practically reeked of garbage and mildew. Sakura already disliked him. She had been willing to give the man the benefit of doubt considering everything she had heard about him was all second-hand information provided by Rias. The very same woman who already held the man in negative regard. But Sakura could definitely understand why. Even now, the man was eyeing her up as if she was some prostitute. HMPH. Too much muscle, he muttered in disgust as his eyes roamed over Sakura. No woman should possess a body like that. Sakura tilted her head at the man before slowly rising to her feet, ignoring Ria's horrified expression. She said nothing as she closed the distance between herself and the arrogant devil before her. Stopping just a foot in front of the man and tilting her head upwards, Sakura merely offered the devil a smile. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Riser did so with ease, all too happy at having another chance of insulting someone who he believed was inferior. I said, no woman should possess a body as freakish as yo. Sakura's right hand closed around Riser's face a moment later, squeezing with reckless abandon. Even though the man was taller than her, Sakura proceeded to raise the man into the air with ease. Her hand began to slowly squeeze, causing Riser's feet to kick viciously at her. Adorable. The medic cooed softly. You think you're allowed to have an opinion? Release him now. A voluptuous, purple-haired woman screamed, charging up a generous amount of power in her hands. Sakura flicked the woman a bored glance, spotting the entire peerage gearing up for an attack. Her eyes flashed as she flexed her chakra, causing all the women to drop to their knees. Sit down and shut up. The shinobi returned her gaze to the struggling Phoenix. She felt a scorching pain emanate from her hand as Riser desperately gripped her wrists. Smoke began to waft off her burning flesh as Riser continued to struggle against her monumental strength. Sakura pursed her lips before raising Riser's body higher. A second later his head had become incredibly intimate with the floor. A shockwave detonated through the clubhouse that nearly caused the building to crumble. With her hand still attached to Riser's face, Sakura proceeded to squeeze tighter, causing Riser to release several muffled screams of pain. So, you're Riser Phoenix, yeah? Sakura's eyes suddenly snapped to the right, eyeing a unique sigil forming on the ground. From the sigil a beautiful woman with silver hair appeared, dressed in a standard maid uniform. Ah, Graphia Lucifuge. What a shame. She would have loved to pop this little shit's head. I would highly advise against resorting to violence. Graphia stated, but really demanded. It is unprofessional considering the circumstances, wouldn't you say, Sakura-sama? The medic's response was to increase the strength of her grip on Riser. There was a vicious cracking noise that resonated from Riser's broken jaw. Whatever you say, Graphia. After her words, Sakura released her grip on the devil's face before spitting directly on the man's face. Fuck you. You dare. Riser slurred angrily as he writhed on the ground in pain. I'll kill you, you whore. He proceeded to struggle to his feet, cradling his broken jaw. Sakura offered the man a condescending smile as she stood in front of Rias. Weak men should be quiet when in the presence of superior individuals. You wretched lit. Whatever Riser was going to say was prevented as Graphia flexed her power. It was an impressive amount if Sakura were being honest, but it wasn't anything to write home about. Sakura was stronger than the woman. None of that, Riser-sama. Graphia spoke calmly and sternly. Let us be civil. You are here for a reason. Civil. The man cried as his jaw was finally healed. This monstrous ogre broke my jaw and spit on me. Sakura merely smiled with half-lidded eyes. Ah, want me to do it again? I have no problem making your insides become your outsides. The choice is yours, honey. Ria's hand found itself latching onto Sakura's, fingers intertwining and squeezing softly. Sakura's eyes found Ria's and no words were spoken between the two. With nothing but a nod, Sakura seemed to mellow out. Her tense shoulders slowly relaxed while her jaw unclenched. Graphia watched the interaction between the two with curiosity. This was going to cause problems. Rias knew that she was bound by contract to marry Riser, and yet here she was, mingling with not only a human but a female human. This would not do. While Graphia wanted nothing more than to help her sister-in-law, she could not. She was bound by duty and tradition, and thus, it fell to her to enforce these traditions. I would ask that you detach yourself from Rias-sama, Sakura-sama. Graphia practically demanded. Feel free to make me. Sakura countered instantly. Your tradition can suck my non-existent dick. Sakura's words surprised nearly everyone in the room, including Graphia herself. Sakura! Rias exclaimed with widened eyes, shocked at how vulgar Sakura was being. She knew that Sakura preferred to be informal, but she was never this crass and rude. If you want to take her away from me, you'll have to do it by force. Sakura stared directly into Graphia's crimson eyes as she continued. If you think you can beat me, then feel free to throw the first punch. Graphia's blank expression slowly cracked as a small frown formed on her face. This woman, she was anything but weak. Graphia could feel it in her bones. This woman was a monster. How had Rias even found this woman? She could sense an incredulous amount of chakra in the woman, and she was sure that wasn't even the full extent of it. This human woman was relatively unknown, all things considered, but had been around long enough for not only Rias' peerage to be familiar with her but also Sona's. And that begged the question. How long has this human woman been around Rias? How long had these two been intimate? Graphia was at a loss. It was already clear to the queen that this human was aware of the existence of devils and by proxy, the supernatural. With power like that, she wouldn't be surprised if the woman was a part of a faction. The only logical one would be the yokai faction, considering she possessed chakra. Graphia continued to stare at the pink-haired human, sensing the sheer waves of power that flowed throughout her body. Is that it? Rias and Sona had informed Sirzex and Serafal that a yokai representative had come directly to Kuo to oversee the two heiresses. Could this woman be? I think we should all just calm down, nay. A new voice questioned lazily. Graphia's eyes widened only a fraction as she turned towards the new individual. Wait, she recognized this man. Gray hair, business clothing. This was one of the men that had been present at the first initial meeting between the heiresses and the yokai faction. Kakashi-san, Rias called out in surprise. What are you doing here? The now identified Kakashi slowly entered the room with a lazy gait, passing by Rias and Sakura before taking a seat upon the lone desk in the middle of the room. Hello, princess, he greeted with an eye smile. When the Grimoire heiress pouted, he released a quiet chuckle. I'm just here doing my job. As the yokai representative, it is imperative that I oversee issues such as this. Considering we have two extremely hot-headed individuals, I thought it best to be here in case something happened. It'd be a shame if the devils here caused issues between each other. Yusaka-sama wouldn't be too pleased to hear about it, now would she? At his words, Riser released an annoyed scoff. And who do you think you are, trash? Before Kakashi could reprimand him, Graphia did so for him. The maid of Lucifer proceeded to grasp the man by his hair before sweeping his legs out. When Riser fell to his knees, Graphia slammed his forehead onto the ground, ignoring his petulant cries. You will behave yourself, Riser. Graphia demanded fiercely. Ask for forgiveness. Now. When the man refused to speak, Graphia began to encase the man in ice, flexing her power over the man with ease. Stop. Riser immediately pleaded. I apologize. Forgive me. Graphia did not stop. Kakashi watched Lucifer's maid humble the young devil before pulling out his arrow manga. Ma, Graphia-san. It's perfectly fine. Please, there's no need to discipline him so harshly. Sakura wanted to scoff at her sensei's words. The prick deserved to be kicked in the nuts. Repetitively. The silver-haired maid pushed Riser's forehead deeper into the ground, cratering the ground with her strength. I apologize, Kakashi-sama, but I have to respectfully disagree. Children require a firm, guiding hand to prevent tantrums and outbursts. She ignored the man's apologies and smashed his face against the ground even harder. Children should also learn to speak when spoken to. Kakashi hid his smile with ease as he read his book. Well, who am I to disagree with such valid logic and reasoning? Please, be my guest. Graphia acknowledged Kakashi's words and with a wordless nod, proceeded to lift Riser's head before spearing it through the tile of the clubroom. You will remain seated, Riser. You will only rise when spoken to and you will be respectful of all parties here. Do I make myself clear, child? This time, Riser was quick to answer. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Graphia stared down at the arrogant man for several seconds before closing her eyes and taking a calming breath. She slowly stood to her feet, wiped her hands clean, and then proceeded to bow in Kakashi's direction before speaking. I apologize for his outburst, Kakashi-sama. I will take full responsibility for his actions. Kakashi merely waved the woman's apology off. You are forgiven, Graphia-san. For your sake, I hope that it is the last one. We are all friends here, no? He gestured with his free hand before continuing. Do not mind me, I'll just watch. Continue as you were. Graphia took another calming breath before turning towards Rias and her girlfriend. Rias-sama, what is the meaning of this? She gestured to the pink-haired woman, whose hand was clutching Rias' own. A frustrated expression bled into the girl's face as she stepped out from behind Sakura. What's the meaning of this? She asked with disbelief. You of all people should know what's going on. I've told everyone how I've felt about this arranged marriage for years. But does anyone care about how I feel? Of course not. It's all about tradition with you people. Why should I have to suffer? What did I do to deserve it? Graphia weathered the woman's anger with a blank gaze, but deep down, she emphasized with her sister-in-law. Rias was a good girl. An honest one. She didn't deserve to have her entire life dictated for her. No one did. But there was precious little that Graphia could actually do for her. Her hands were tied and she only hoped that Rias could understand. Rias-sama, you have a. The Grimoire immediately cut Graphia off. No, she screamed unapologetically. I'm not doing it. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what I have to do. I'm never going to uphold this contract. With tears in her eyes, Rias stared Graphia in the eyes before speaking quietly. Please, don't do this to me, Graphia. Is there anything I can do? Sakura proposed to Graphia. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help Rias. Well, there was one way. Graphia's eyes bore directly into the chakra-wielding woman as she spoke slowly, meticulously. There is only one way. That being a rating game between both parties. At Graphia's words, Riser's head immediately lifts off the floor. He looked seconds away from combusting, but one look from Lucifer's queen curbed his outburst. I'll do it, Sakura answered instantly, with no hesitation. Graphia merely rose an eyebrow. You will? She questioned. Not Rias-sama. The pink-haired medic cocked her hip out, which in turn, attracted Rias' gaze. Sakura's emerald orb sent her on the down Phoenix as she spoke. I challenge you, Riser Phoenix, to a rating game for the hand of Rias Grimoire. If I win, the wedding contract between you two is null and void. Believing that he had been directly spoken to, Riser snarled angrily. And if I win? The pinkett merely shrugged her shoulders. I'll let you do whatever you want to me. Riser's eyes narrowed at the answer. He was silent for several seconds before scoffing and speaking. And what if I refuse to accept this stupid little challenge? Sakura merely smiled. You have no choice here. The challenge has already been issued, and if you refuse to accept it, then I win by default. She cocked her head to the side, reveling in the man's anger. Now, are you going to accept it and fight me? Or are you going to run away like the little pussy you are? Riser snarled angrily as flames began to waft off his body. With the threat of Graphia so close to him, he did his best to calm his ever-increasing anger. I will enjoy burning you alive. A wicked smile formed on Sakura's face. I can't wait to tear you apart. Limb. By. Fucking. Limb. Before another fight could break out, Graphia intervened between the two. It is settled. A rating game that will determine who gets Rias' hand in marriage has now commenced. Her gaze swept from the human woman to the high-class devil as she continued. Is there a particular date that you two wish to settle this matter? Before Riser could insult Sakura, she spoke first. In 10 days' time. Her emerald eyes bore into Riser's eyes with malicious intent. I'll give you some time to prepare for when I inevitably rip your head off. Riser growled angrily at constantly being disrespected. I'm going to gut you, whore. After I crush you, I'm going to enjoy taking your body. That will be enough. Graphia demanded. Riser, leave. The man looked fit to combust, but one look from Graphia caused him to bite his tongue. Not a moment later did he, and his peerage, disappear. Graphia's eyes slowly drifted towards Rias as she spoke. I hope you know what you're doing, Rias-sama. The crimson-haired devil only frowned at Graphia's statement. Nothing you say will make me regret this decision. Nothing. The small smile on Graphia's face surprised Rias. Good luck, Sakura-sama. With those parting words, the strongest queen disappeared from the clubroom. The room was silent for several seconds before Sakura released a huge sigh. She proceeded to lean against the table, eyes straying to the hand that was still clutching hers. She merely smiled as Rias herself proceeded to sit on top the desk. Ya no. Rias spoke quietly with a small blush. It was low-key kind of hot when you spit on Riser. There will be plenty of time for Sakura to spit on you later, Rias-chan. Right now, we have to get your story straight before continuing. Kakashi piped up with a laugh. Even Sakura was unable to contain the blush that spread across her face. Shut the hell up, sensei.
Well, at least it all worked out. Sona piped up quietly, ordering her peerage to leave the clubroom. Seems like you didn't really need me here at all, Rias.
Finally getting her blush under control, the crimson-haired Grimoire waved towards her best friend. Regardless, thank you for showing up, Sona. It means a lot.
The bespectacled woman merely nodded her head as she left. Of course, Rias. When Sona left, Rias released a huge sigh before finally letting go of Sakura's hand and throwing herself on the table. That was so stressful. Sakura merely smiled as she responded. Job's not done yet, Rias. I still have to win the rating game.
The red-haired devil only groaned quietly, flailing about on the table like a child. It did glorious things to her breasts. Can't we just relax for now? Please see. The medic sighed quietly before replying. Fine. Yay. Sakura sighed pleasantly to herself, allowing the scalding hot water to cascade down her naked body. Leaning her head on the wall of the rather fancy shower in the clubroom, Sakura idly massaged her tense muscles. Another 10 days had passed and still not a word or peep from Sasuke pertaining to Naruto and the situation with the Greek pantheon. Well, at least the world wasn't shaking. So, that had to be a positive, right?
Naruto would behave himself, surely. He had to, right? He knew how dire this situation was and the potential fallout that could escalate should an issue rise. Hopefully. Sakura? Are you almost finished? The medic's emerald orbs shifted towards the door of the bathroom, hearing Rias' voice on the other side. I want to discuss something before the rating game, if that's alright with you. There was hesitation in the girl's voice, almost timid to a degree. Sakura rose a curious eyebrow at that before shrugging her shoulders. In a fluid motion she turned off the water and stepped out of the shower before swiftly wrapping her body up in a towel.
Sakura opened the door a moment later, not bothering to dry herself off. A teasing smile bled to life as she noticed Ria's shocked expression, not expecting her to just come out without properly dressing herself. Teasing Rias was enjoyable. Crossing her toned arms against her chest, Sakura leaned against the door of the bathroom. What did ya wanna talk about? Muscles. Big muscles, Rias idly commented, staring with wide eyes at the pink-haired girl's arms. Yes, they are rather large considering my physique isn't all that impressive. Sakura responded easily, smiling to herself. Do you want me to flex? She made a show of uncrossing her arms, smiling as Rias seemed to finally come to her senses. That won't be necessary. Rias shook her hands, closing her eyes with a blush. I wasn't trying to stare. They're just there, ya know. Sakura smirked to herself, lowering her arms and crossing them again. I mean, if you wanted to see 'em, all you had to do is just ask. She shrugged her shoulders flippantly. What's the point of having these muscles if no one's gonna see 'em? You mean it? Rias asked in a giddy tone, like an excited child. She paused for a moment, noticing Sakura's growing smirk. Stop teasing me. Adorable. The medic commented, causing another blush to sprout on the redhead's face. I'll see you in a minute. She proceeded to step back into the bathroom, closing the door a moment after. Sakura completely missed Rias' disappointed expression. A few minutes passed by before Sakura emerged from the bathroom, this time though, she was fully clothed. Instead of her pink, crop top sweater, she had opted for a simple black, sports bra covered by a high-cut black jacket. She still wore a pair of black leggings and a simple pair of sneakers though. What did you wanna talk about, Rias? She asked curiously, noticing the other girl's lingering glance. Deciding to not tease the poor redhead, Sakura began to walk towards the clubroom. Rias resisted the urge to pout once more before following after the medic. Well, she began timidly, not truly knowing how to phrase her words. There's been some unforeseen happenings regarding the rating game. Sakura's eyebrows furrowed at that, walking into the clubroom before taking a seat behind Rias' desk. Unforeseen happenings, she parroted confusedly. What do you mean, Rias? The red-headed heiress, ignoring the urge to pout at having her seat taken, opted to seat herself on the corner of the desk, body half facing Sakura as she responded nervously. Wheel. I might have let it slip that. Well, ya know. Rias. Sakura demanded sharply, staring directly at the side of the girl's head. The redhead cringed at the girl's tone, staring at the floor and very much ignoring the glare directed at her. Please don't be mad at me. She all but pleaded, turning towards her, her crush, and clasping her hands together. Sakura's eyebrows furrowed at the girl's words. Rias, what did you do? The girl slumped pathetically atop the desk, whining to herself and muttering various phrases and curses. The displaced Kunoichi only rolled her eyes at the girl's childish antics. It was both amusing and adorable. Whatever it was, it couldn't be that bad, right? After groaning for another second or so, Rias fell back onto the desk, causing her massive breasts to bounce at the action, briefly drawing Sakura's gaze. I might have told a few friends that I was able to find a way out of my contract. The girl covered her eyes with her left hand, cheeks blushing up a storm as she spoke. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was just so happy. I've lived with this dangling over my head for practically my whole life. Can a girl be blamed for finally being happy? Her words caused Sakura's expression to soften. Rias was silent for a moment before continuing, still covering her face in what Sakura interpreted as embarrassment. I guess my old friends went and spread the word about the entire situation. The next few days, I'm getting texts and calls from cousins I've never spoken to, congratulating me or reprimanding me. Even people I've never formally spoken to. Shaking her head, Rias sighed quietly. This rating game of yours was supposed to be an unofficial match. Sakura tilted her head at that. Supposed to be. What happened? The girl grimaced briefly before removing her hand and staring up at the ceiling. Apparently, word got around. And when I mean around, I mean around. Rias paused for a moment before glancing towards the Pinkett. What's the biggest crowd you've ever fought in front of, Sakura? If you've done that, at all. The medic blinked at the question, tilting her head to think about it. When Naruto had gone on his 3-year training trip with Jiraiya, she, alongside the rest of the remaining Konoha genin, had started their training for the next Chunin exams. Sakura had eventually performed in the exams, taking place in Suna a year and a half after Naruto left the village. She had formed a ragtag team with 2 unknown Konoha genin, foregoing the plan of performing with Tenten and Lee due to unforeseen circumstances. That was a story for another time. However, she had passed the initial testing, barely so due to her team's lack of chemistry. But they had passed all the same regardless. However, that's where her 2 teammates' run ended. Following the initial testing was a rather rigorous and brutal event where the various teams were segregated from one another and dropped into the harsh desert of Suna, forced to fend for themselves whilst locating and defeating other teams. Sakura had shouldered the massive burden of carrying her teammates through that particular event and had only passed by the skin of her teeth due to some much-needed luck on the final day of the event. Her 2 teammates had been drained, both physically and emotionally, and she did not necessarily fault them for quitting when they did. Sakura herself went on to the finals and made it rather decently far, all things considered. She had defeated her first opponent with relative ease, but the second one. Who would have thought that a Jinchuriki was also participating? A mocha-skinned girl with green hair who went by the name of Fu had been her opponent, and while Sakura didn't necessarily get thrashed by the girl, it wasn't that close of a fight either. The girl was incredibly powerful and had near full control of her Biju's abilities. Sakura had come to find out during their fight that the girl was the Nanabi Jinchuriki, and didn't that just make it all the more frustrating? While she put up a valiant effort, she was eventually defeated by the girl, who then went on to win the entire thing. No surprises there really. But why is this information relevant? Well, there had been a rather large crowd in Suna that had watched the final exam. She didn't have exact numbers, but perhaps it was in the low hundreds. Sakura glanced at the redhead, finally speaking after a minute or so. Well, give or take a couple hundred. Rias turned her head towards the girl before speaking. Yeah, that's actually kinda cool. She spoke offhandedly before shaking her head. Yeah, well, you're going to be fighting in front of 20,000 devils. Sakura's eyes widened to saucers at the sheer number. Rias, what, 20,000? The heiress grimaced at the girl, covering her face with her hands. I don't know how it happened. All I did was tell a few old friends. I didn't think it would explode like this. Sakura sat quietly, still shocked at the sheer number of attendees that'd be watching her fight with Riser. How? Why did it gain this much traction? By no means am I an expert of rating games, but those numbers are damn near professional games. Rias only chuckled nervously, scratching her cheek with her left hand. Aha, well, that number is how many will be physically attending the event, not the actual overall number. Rias. Sakura spoke quietly, eyes widening. What are you saying? The girl whined cutely, rolling back and forth on the desk in embarrassment. It's going to be broadcasted on the official rating game channel. Every devil who's a fan of rating games is going to be watching. Sakura's mouth dropped for a moment as she spoke. I thought unofficial games weren't streamed. Unless. The redhead only nodded her head as she covered her face. It's being changed to an official match. With it being an official match, the rule format is changing and it'll have a professional rule set alongside it. This match is even more unique due to the fact that you're a human. It's incredibly rare for a rating match to occur outside of two devils facing one another. Add on to the fact that you're also fighting to void a contract that has been tradition in our people for thousands of years. Sakura, I'm so sorry. While yes, this was rather surprising and shocking, it changed very little to Sakura. She still had a duty to perform and she'd see to it. If anything, this was going to only embolden her performance. Not only would she get a chance to completely humble and dissect her opponent, but she'd get to do so in front of thousands. A devious smile fixed itself to her face. Oh yes, this was going to be exhilarating. It'd show the devil race that even humans could stand to them. Thousands upon thousands of individuals, all across the underworld, were going to be watching this match. I know that look, Sakura. The pink-haired girl glanced towards the corner of the room, spotting her sensei. All I'm going to say is don't get carried away. The medic's smile was all teeth. When have I ever gotten carried away, sensei? Kakashi didn't even bother giving the girl a dry stare. He knew what Sakura was capable of, more than even Naruto and Sasuke did. His pink-haired student had always possessed a chip on her shoulder. She had been saddled alongside two prodigies from the age of 12 and was essentially told to keep up. She had her insecurities, her weakness and her lack of accountability growing up as a kunoichi on Team 7. But after her training with Tsunade, she had changed. It was a small one, nearly unnoticeable, but Kakashi had spotted it. Sakura was capable of greatness and the only one who could determine how far that greatness went was the girl herself. Sakura had been shackled with emotional drama during her time as a kunoichi under Team 7. Only after coming to this world had she finally been freed of those weights. And Kakashi feared what an unchained Sakura could really do if pushed to do so. Damn the incredulous amount of chakra in her seal, damn the lethal taijutsu under her belt, and even damn the ridiculous strength she possessed. Sakura had a dangerous mind and she was fully capable of utilizing it with lethal precision. Kakashi pitied Riser and his peerage. He well and truly did. The man wasn't facing Sakura Haruno, esteemed medic Chunin of Konoha under Team 7. The man was facing Sakura Haruno, wielder of the boosted gauntlet and guardian of the yokai faction under the Shinto pantheon. Nothing more was needed to be said. I pity the man, Kakashi stated quietly, turning a page of his hentai manga. How unfortunate. Riser's a prick. He doesn't deserve anyone's pity. Rias replied in a snarky manner, folding her arms across her voluptuous chest. Sakura shrugged at the comment, not truly caring one way or another. She was going to destroy Riser and his peerage, and that was that. Closing her eyes, Sakura tilted her head down, opting to meditate before the match. In doing so, she was thrust into her mindscape, coming face to face with her sacred gear. Opening her eyes, she slowly stood to her feet, staring up at the massive red dragon. You ready for this, D-Drake? I'm always ready for a fight, partner. If you need me, call upon me. I will be happy to lend my power. The giant dragon nodded its head as it spoke. Sakura smiled to herself before raising her fist towards the creature. The dragon did not hesitate to ball its clawed hand, raising it and gently tapping it against Sakura's much smaller one. You think you'll be able to use Juggernaut Drive soon? She asked curiously, pulling her fist away. You could use it now, if you so pleased. The red beast responded simply. Sakura rolled her eyes playfully, dropping to her haunches and sitting down. Yeah, but I mean, like, being of sane mind. D-Drake pivoted its massive bulk towards the girl as it responded. That depends entirely on you, partner. The power of a dragon is one built upon by sheer willpower. The stronger your will, the stronger you are. Sakura was quiet for a moment before leaning back in the mindscape. Is that why all dragons are considered prideful? D-Drake rumbled quietly. Precisely. The medic hummed quietly, choosing to remain silent at her sacred gear's response. For the next few hours, the two companions remained quiet, merely enjoying the silence. Sakura's form began to shimmer, and in doing so, the girl hummed quietly. Guess it's time, D-Drake. Wish me luck. Rising to her feet, the girl gave a salute to the massive dragon. You need no luck, partner. Overwhelming power courses through your veins. We will be victorious. Sakura merely smiled at the prideful dragon, shimmering into light particles as she disappeared from the shared mindscape. Sakura's eyes slowly opened, coming face to face with a pair of bright, blue-green eyes. Staring into the eyes for a moment, Sakura tilted her head, wondering why Rias was so close to her. Can I help you? She asked politely. You have pretty eyes. The redhead complimented with a small smile. I just wanted to see them. Rias pulled away a moment later, smiling to herself as she did. Sakura blinked at the response, not really expecting such a simple compliment. For some reason, it made her chest warm. It was so different being complimented. She had never received many compliments growing up in Konoha, and the fact that Rias did so as frequently as she did usually left her quiet and bashful. Thank you, she responded, mentally cursing herself for the minor stutter. Should we? Is it time? She asked, changing the subject before Rias could capitalize and potentially tease her for her slip-up. Not a second after her question did she sense an influx of power enter the room. Her eyes snapped towards the sigil appearing in the middle of the room, followed by the familiar form of Lucifer's queen maid. Graphia's crimson eyes traveled along the room, bowing to each and every member of Rias' peerage whilst also greeting Kakashi and Sakura individually. Rias-sama, she greeted with a deep bow. Her face was blank though her crimson eyes were decidedly soft. Rias offered the woman a smile and a simple greeting in return. The queen turned her gaze towards Sakura before bowing once more and speaking. Sakura-sama, are you prepared to leave? The pink-haired medic glanced towards Rias for a moment before nodding her head. I'm ready, Graphia-san. The queen nodded her head, clasping her hands together in front of her. Did Rias-sama inform you of the alterations made to your rating game match? Sakura gave a single nod at the woman's question. Then I ask that you come with me so that we may officially start. Graphia bowed, gesturing with her hand towards the space behind her. Sakura inhaled deeply, holding the breath for a moment before exhaling slowly. She slowly stood to her feet before making her way towards Lucifer's maid. Upon reaching the woman, she pivoted on her heel, staring at Rias in her peerage alongside her former sensei. Good luck, Sakura, Rias encouraged with a bright smile, pumping her fist like an excited child. Beat the shit out of Riser. Language, Rias-sama, Graphia chided with furrowed eyebrows, causing Rias' peerage to chuckle quietly. The redhead merely smiled at the scolding from her sister-in-law before making an, okay hands, gesture to her crush. We'll be watching you here, Sakura. You got this. We believe in you. A soft smile formed on Sakura's face at the girl's words, catching her little slip-up. Rias was far too adorable for her own good. She nodded her head in thanks before shifting her gaze to her former sensei. Kakashi said nothing, only briefly dipping his head her way with a stoic expression. Give one hell of a show. Sakura merely smirked at the man, knowing exactly what he was asking of her. The maid and medic disappeared from the room in a vortex of swirling, crimson energy. The room was silent for a moment before Akino giggled quietly. Foo. Do you miss your girlfriend already, Bushu? Shish, shut up, Akino. When the crimson energy surrounding her dissipated, Sakura immediately tried to make sense of her surroundings. When she did, it caused her eyebrows to furrow. She had been here before. Swiveling her head around the void, spotting the nigh infinite amount of colors cascading the skies, she spoke quietly. The dimensional gap. Her emerald orbs sharpened for a moment as she stared out into the empty void. Interesting. How did you know? Graphia questioned curiously, wondering how a human knew of the dimensional gap. Sakura turned her attention back towards Graphia, shrugging her shoulders lazily. I've been here before. Though, we're likely in a barrier. Some sort of controlled space at least. I doubt you can really control the dimensional gap and utilize its space for whatever you wish. A segmented zone that spans maybe a few kilometers is all your kind can control. For now, she mumbled the last part, eyes still occasionally roaming around the area. This girl continued to surprise Graphia. She was a powerful, chakra-wielding human with no known affiliation with any faction, who just so happened to be potentially romantically involved with a rather high-profile devil heiress and who also possessed no known background of any kind in Japan whilst also having been to the dimensional gap before. If it was up to Graphia, she'd have tried to assassinate the girl. A woman of this stature could only be a threat, but it wasn't up to Graphia. So, she would stay her hand. Though deep down, Something told her that if she tried to carry out her action, she'd likely not succeed. Not a moment later did another brief flash emanate in the barrier of the dimensional gap. From the light came 16 individuals, 1 male and 15 women, respectively. Sakura merely ignored the group, pocketing her hands into her jacket whilst staring out into the open space, wondering how the devils were able to utilize a particular space in the dimensional gap. Are you prepared to grovel, peasant? Riser insulted, asked Sakura, who stood a little less than 5 meters away. Sakura ignored the man easily, only rolling her eyes at his words. She was going to feed him his own teeth anyway. Too scared to speak now. What happened to your words from before? Were you only talk, then? Huh, answer me, gorilla. Sakura's eyes flashed as she flared her chakra. Violently. Crimson energy seemed to seep from her pores, surrounding her and cascading along her skin. Her power continued to rise, causing even Graphia to take a step back in surprise. It rose, and rose, and rose, and rose. Graphia's eyes only widened at the display, shocked beyond belief at the sheer power leaking from the human woman. This girl, she very nearly rivaled a Satan. And then it suddenly stopped. The power disappeared, as if never having existed. It flooded back into the pink-haired medic with ease, showcasing her finite and precise control. I'm gonna enjoy breaking every bone in your body. Sakura threatened calmly, eyes now burning a vicious shade of scarlet with a draconic slit through the middle. Before the situation could escalate, Graphia managed to compose herself. Stepping between the two parties, she spoke with only a minor tremor in her voice. This rating game will be treated as an official match between Sakura-sama and Riser-sama. Do both parties agree? Sakura merely nodded her head, keeping her hands in her jacket pocket. Riser released a shaky exhale before nodding his head. I agree. Noting their acceptance, the maid proceeded to clap her hands before crossing them. Holding them high in the air, she proceeded to channel an impressive amount of demonic energy, causing a translucent light to suddenly surround a large portion of the space they were in. Sakura raised an eyebrow at the woman's actions, still curious at just how the woman was creating the barrier that they would be fighting in. There must have been devil magic that she couldn't hope to understand happening before her very eyes. A minute or so passed by before Graphia ceased her actions. Upon doing so, her voice became amplified and she started speaking in a manner that resembled a sports announcer. Welcome devils. For today's main event, we have an official rating game between the human, Sakura Haruno. The woman paused briefly, gesturing towards the pink-haired woman. Her other arm rose as she spoke, introducing Riser and his peerage. And the high-class devil, Riser Phoenix. The man and his peerage gave exaggerated bows, causing Sakura to roll her eyes. She wondered where the cameras were. She had been told that everything was being broadcasted. Probably some devil magic that she didn't understand. Today's particular rating game will be. The woman paused for a moment as she channeled her power. A single dice with 10 sides appeared in the palm of her hand before she threw it in the air. The small dice proceeded to grow as large as a house before being surrounded by demonic energy. It spun faster than the eye could see before abruptly dropping to the ground a moment later. The 10-sided dice ended with a large number 9 on it. Board collapse. Graphia roared, completely unlike her stoic and composed personality. Before Sakura's very eyes, the dimensional gap proceeded to lurch and expand, shifting and changing the terrain with ease. Her eyebrows furrowed at the action, almost in awe at the sheer control that the devils had over this specific barrier. Since Sakura Haruno was the individual to challenge Riser Phoenix, she will choose the terrain in which the match takes place. Sakura furrowed her eyebrows for a moment before shrugging her shoulders. Kanahagakure. Before her very eyes, the terrain and void space shifted and altered. A blue sky formed out of nothingness as an exact replica of the training grounds she had grew up on, formed. The girl's lips parted, completely surprised to see a section of her home once more. It very nearly brought a tear to her eyes as she slowly stumbled her way towards a rather thick log that rested near the center of the training ground. A small smile formed on her face as she bent her knees, standing just in front of the log that Naruto had been tied to when they were genin. Her fingers ran along the hardened wood for a moment as she reminisced on her time as a genin. This was the very same area in which they had become actual shinobi for Konoha. An area that she knew like the back of her hand. How very bland. Riser insulted, shifting his gaze around the forested area. A ways away, there was a rather large lake and various training dummies and other weapons affiliated with the ninja of Japan. What is that monstrosity? His peerage shifted their gaze towards the direction he spoke of, spotting an incredibly large mountain that had several faces carved into it. Sakura stayed kneeling in front of the log, ignoring the insults from Riser and his group. Her eyes narrowed briefly before closing. Leaning her forehead against the wooden log, she spoke softly to herself. I'm sorry. For everything. Are you okay, partner? Who are you apologizing to? The medic merely smiled at Ddrake's question, nothing the concern in his deep, baritone voice. I'm apologizing to myself. Ddrake's confusion wasn't voiced, but Sakura knew that the dragon was stumped by her words. She didn't need to explain herself, and so, she wouldn't. The woman slowly stood to her feet before stretching and popping her joints, getting ready for the battle that was coming. An interesting and unique terrain to do battle. Grafia announced once again, though this time, the woman was nowhere to be seen. As stated previously, today's unique rating game will be Board Collapse. For those watching who know not what Board Collapse is, allow me to explain to you. Board Collapse is a unique variant of the standard rating game. However, the caveat is that both ends of the venue will slowly collapse at the same time until only the center of the barrier is remaining. Meaning, both parties will be forced to fight regardless of how long it shall take. Every 5 minutes, the venue will crumble and collapse by 500 meters. Today's terrain is only a measly 2 kilometers, which means that, at most, today's match will only last a total of 20 minutes. Grafia allowed a brief moment of silence to pass before speaking once again. Sakura Haruno, are you prepared to engage in today's rating game? Sakura rolled her neck for a moment before nodding her head and taking off her jacket, leaving herself in the simple, black sports bra. Riser Phoenix, are you prepared to engage in today's rating game? Riser and his peerage all gave their affirmatives, preparing themselves for the battle that was surely to come. Then without further ado, fight on, Grafia roared loudly. Sakura, alongside Riser and his peerage, were engulfed in a flash of white light before being teleported in opposite directions to their base. That does indeed look like Konoha. Impressive that your kind was able to replicate it, down to the Hokage monument. Kakashi mumbled quietly, watching the rating game from his seat on the couch. Rias tilted her head curiously. Konoha is your village, yeah. Sakura brought it up in passing one day, but she didn't go into much detail. She questioned curiously, eyes roaming along the TV and admiring the archaic Japanese architecture. Kakashi merely smiled to himself. Indeed it was. Yuto questioned curiously. Kakashi did not respond as he continued to stare at the TV, a hint of fondness in his eyes. None of Ria's peerage pushed the issue after his silence. Sakura opened her eyes to find herself in a room that she was intimately familiar with, considering she had spent so much time in it alongside her master. So, her base was the Hokage office. Which meant that Riser's base was the massive gates of Konoha. A direct straight shot would take her right to the man. Her thoughts were cut off as the dimensional gap proceeded to rumble and quake. Already? Well, that was relatively fast. Shaking her head, Sakura's eyes glanced towards her old master's desk. Tilting her head for a moment, the girl walked around the desk before taking a knee and reaching under the desk. Her fingers danced along the wood for a moment before a quiet click was heard. A secret compartment snapped open, revealing an old, green bottle with liquid in it. A small grin formed on the medic's face as she pulled the bottle out of the hidden compartment. In her hands was revealed to be a special bottle of liquor. Not just any special liquor, but Tsunade's special liquor. Sake that could only be created in Mount Myoboku. Uncorking the bottle, Sakura pressed her lips to the bottle before practically chugging the sake. Gulp after gulp, swallow after swallow. Sakura downed the bottle of alcohol before pulling it away from her lips and wiping her mouth. It was like liquid heaven. It nearly made her want to cry then and there. It tasted the same. Sakura clenched her eyes shut before taking a calming breath. A bit of heat seared her cheeks, courtesy of the rather strong liquor she had just devoured. After taking a moment to calm herself, the woman proceeded to twirl the bottle between her fingers before standing to her feet and making her way towards the window. Green eyes sharpened, flicking towards random directions with no discernible pattern. After a brief moment of doing this, Sakura proceeded to shift her feet, pulling her arm back and taking aim out the window. One of the girl's legs rose as she wound her arm back, similar to that of a pitcher. Nodding to herself, the girl proceeded to twist her hips before rocketing the empty bottle out towards the direction. The sheer strength from her throw kicked up a vicious shockwave that decimated the Hokage office. The glass bottle careened through the village, unable to be tracked for the brief moment it had been thrown. Less than a second passed before a tremor shook the makeshift Konoha, followed by a tremendous shockwave. Mira has been eliminated. Sakura, now standing in the ruined office, grinned to herself at having nailed the woman nearly a kilometer out. Easy pickings. 15 left to go. Disappearing in a burst of speed, Sakura performed various shunshuns, skipping along rooftops and ignoring the nostalgia of being in her old home. Spreading her senses out, she was pleasantly surprised to note that nearly half of Riser's peerage were capable of actually hiding their signature from her. They must be on edge. Sakura locked onto a random signature that was near here before skipping along the roof she was on. She easily glided along the shingles of the home, skating down the material and kicking off the adjacent wall before darting through several random alleys, while bouncing between them to keep her momentum. Locking onto her target, a woman with short brown hair, wearing an odd mix of a battle dress with various armor plating, Sakura dove towards the woman, blitzing the woman before she could react. Sakura's fingers dug deep into the woman's short locks, ignoring the girl's cry of pain. Sakura slung the woman into one of the alley walls. The sword-wielding woman had all but a second to brace herself before she crashed through the dense material of the building. Sakura was quick to follow after the woman, spotting her trying to rise to her feet. Appearing beside the woman with her foot raised to the ceiling, Sakura proceeded to bring her foot down. To Sakura's surprise, the woman dodged the attack by the slightest of margins, nose merely skimming along Sakura's sneakers. A moment later, the building collapsed due to the sheer strength of Sakura's kick, forcing the sword-wielding woman to retreat into the street. The woman grit her teeth, watching the building collapse as a trickle of blood fell down her face. Carlomine's chest rose and fell harshly, adrenaline surging through her veins as she waited for the attack that was sure to come. Standing in a defensive stance with both arms bracing her sword, she was woefully unprepared for the sheer speed at which Sakura moved. All Carlomine saw was a flash of pink before her vision was flipped upside down. Vertigo racked her body and a sense of weightlessness assaulted her core as she was airborne. Sakura grunted quietly, arms wrapped around the sword-wielding woman before her spine bent backwards. A vicious shockwave racked the street as the medic proceeded to suplex Carlomine through the earth. Carlomine has been eliminated. The body in Sakura's clutches shimmered in blue particles of light before disappearing entirely, signaling that the woman had been retired. The medic rolled her neck at the announcement, slowly rising from her previous position. 14 to go. Sakura twitched and not a second later did she bend her body at an unorthodox angle, dodging the sword swipe that would have surely taken her head off. Emerald orbs caught sight of long, blue hair tied in several long ponytails, before being forced to dodge once more as a fist suddenly appeared on the edge of her peripherals. Displaying a ridiculous degree of dexterity and flexibility, Sakura twisted her body before kicking off the blue-haired woman's sword and using the momentum to stick to one of the various buildings that didn't get destroyed by her super-powered suplex. TCH. A mask-wearing, well-endowed woman grunted in annoyance. You weren't fast enough, Cyrus. HMPH. The woman known as Cyrus replied. You weren't fast enough. It was your idea in the first place, Isabella. Whatever Isabella was going to say was prevented as Sakura launched herself at the woman, stepping into the woman's guard and throwing a straight jab towards her chin. Isabella proved she was no slouch in close-quarters combat as she deftly avoided the strike that would have taken her head off. The woman shifted on the tips of her toes, taking up a boxing stance before throwing her own punch towards the medic. Sakura's eyes flashed for a brief moment, as she weaved around the punch. Her left hand snaked around the first and using her absurd strength, proceeded to lift the woman off her feet. Hey! Isabella cried, taken by surprise at the sheer physical strength the woman possessed. Cyrus. The remaining knight of Riser's peerage flashed behind Sakura, her Zweihander cutting the air to bisect the pink-haired woman. Sakura shifted her body on a dime, using Isabella as a makeshift bat and swinging the woman's body into the night. Unprepared for the action, Cyrus could only exclaim in surprise before releasing a cry of pain as she was sent rocketing backwards, crashing into and then through said building. Oh shit, Isabella swore, grunting in pain at having been used as a humanoid bat. Sakura's left hand squeezed painfully, grinding the woman's bones together before slamming her directly into the earth. A vicious shockwave detonated the area, causing several of the surrounding buildings to fall due to the strength of Sakura's attack. Isabella's cry of pain was muffled as she was buried through the earth before the feeling of weightlessness assaulted her once more. Her eyes widened and before she could hope to escape from the woman's monstrous grip, she was yet again slammed into the earth, causing several shockwaves. Isabella was slammed into the earth again and again. The feeling of vertigo coming and going as she was manhandled by the pink-haired woman. The only thing keeping her from being retired was the fact that she was a rook with enhanced durability. After the fifth slam, Sakura clicked her teeth before throwing the near-unconscious woman directly into the air. Isabella's body ragdolled for a moment in the air before Sakura suddenly appeared in the air, heel raised towards the heavens. Sudankyaku. Sakura's foot axed down upon Isabella's spine, causing the woman to scream in agony. Her body impacted the earth near instantaneously, spearing directly into the ground several meters deep. Isabella had been eliminated. As Sakura was falling back to the earth, she sensed Cyrus flash behind her, large sword reared back to slash through her. Twisting her body in midair, Sakura slapped the woman's sword with her bare hand, causing Cyrus' torso to be wide open. Cyrus, having not expected the action, could only widen her eyes in shock as Sakura's fist slowly raised towards her chest, merely an inch away. Time seemed to move in slow motion for Cyrus as Sakura flared her chakra before attacking. Okasho. Sakura performed a simple 1-inch punch that practically caved in Cyrus' chest, causing the woman to eject a stream of blood from her mouth. Her body careened into a various building, taking it down in the process. Cyrus has been eliminated. Sakura landed on the ground a moment later before cracking her neck. 12 more to go. Oh my. Akino blinked as she watched Sakura utterly annihilate Riser's peerage. I think I'm falling in love, Bushu. Ria's inflamed face was well worth the tease in Akino's opinion. Foo. Do you think you can share her, Bushu? Rias glared at her queen with red cheeks. I'm not sharing her with anyone. Ho. Kakashi joined in the teasing not a moment later. What a greedy princess, Rias. You want my student for yourself then? That, you. The heiress groaned quietly to herself, covering her face in embarrassment at the teasing. Stop teasing me. The rest of Rias' peerage chuckled quietly to themselves, enjoying the snacks provided by the queen. Our Riser-sama, a well-endowed woman with purple hair spoke with slight concern, feeling the quakes through the village. Should we do something? She's eliminated several members before the next collapse has even happened. Riser growled quietly to himself, eyes roaming over his remaining peerage. His face contorted angrily before he pointed towards the center of the village. Eel, Nell, Ni, Li, Sharia, Bulant, Marion. He ordered through the earpiece he shared with his peerage. He received several affirmations from the women before ordering them to attack Sakura all at once. Yubeluna was silent for a moment before speaking. Is it wise to sacrifice our pawns so soon? Riser scoffed at his queen's words before replying. They cannot hope to defeat her, only slow her down. Beside him, Ravel frowned quietly to herself, not enjoying her brother's treatment of his peerage. It happened abruptly. There was a brief surge of insane power before a terrifying earthquake shook the entire village, followed by a crimson wave of energy that resembled a dragon. Eel has been eliminated. Nell has been eliminated. Ni has been eliminated. Li has been eliminated. Sharia has been eliminated. Bulant has been eliminated. Marion has been eliminated. What? Yubeluna exclaims in surprise. A sacred gear. Riser frowned at the ridiculous power he had sensed. This was not good. Sakura hummed quietly to herself, stepping through the destruction she had wrought after eliminating Cyrus, Carlemine and Isabella. She proceeded to jump onto a random roof before hopping to various roofs. She sensed them before they even attacked. 7 of Riser's pawns all appeared at the same time, with various degrees of devil magic ready to be used. Sakura scowled at the display before raising her right arm in the air and calling upon Didrake. Boost. The draconic crimson gauntlet appeared, green gem glistening as bright as the sun. Boost. The pawns all recoiled at the sight of the sacred gear and the sheer increase to Sakura's power. The crimson gauntlet on the woman's hand glowed a furious red before the woman chambered her fist towards her chest. Okasho. Sakura released the pent-up power as she launched her fist towards the group, sending a gigantic dragon-esque ball of energy towards the pawns. They were engulfed near instantly, being forcefully retired by the power. Sakura clicked her teeth in annoyance before glancing towards the direction in which she could sense the remaining members of Riser's peerage. With her boosted gear still active, Sakura immediately took off towards the direction, destroying the earth as she did. Skipping along the rooftops and jumping off various obstacles, Sakura arrived near the front gates of the village, eyes darting around for any sign of Riser and his remaining peerage members. She stood still for a minute or so before an influx of power behind her caused her to turn towards it. Not a moment later did the area that Sakura was standing in become engulfed by an explosion of epic proportion. Ash and soot slowly fell from the sky as Yubeluna floated above the area. Her eyes strayed to and fro, desperately searching for any sign of Sakura's presence. The announcer hadn't spoken yet, so it was highly unlikely. Yubeluna's train of thought was halted immediately as a crimson gauntlet wrapped itself around her face, squeezing with reckless abandon. The well-endowed woman screamed in pain as Sakura's gauntlet-clad hand continued to squeeze the woman's skull. Boost. A vicious smirk formed on Sakura's face as crimson energy began to build up in her gauntlet. Spotting Sakura's sick smirk, the Devil Queen flexed her power, desperately trying to prevent the woman from launching her attack. Several dozen explosions rang off emanating directly from Yubelluna's position as the woman practically kamikazed herself to take Sakura with her. Yubelluna has been eliminated. Riser's eyes widened at the announcement, watching as his queen was forcefully retired. His teeth gnashed together a moment later upon, noticing that the human hadn't been eliminated as well. Meanwhile, Ravel and Mahai watched on in horror as the cloud of smoke began to slowly dissipate, revealing a relatively unharmed Sakura. The only damage they could see upon the woman was a minor burns upon her right arm, though most of her arm had been protected by the sacred gear. The boosted gear, Ravel exclaimed in fear, watching as Sakura slowly walked towards them. She has one of the 13 Longinus. Ravel caught a blur of blue and white speed pass her. Her eyes widened to saucers as she screamed. Shueilin no. She stretched her arm out towards the woman to prevent her but was far too slow. Ravel watched on in muted fear as Shueilin was dismantled with ease. Sakura dodged the martial artist's strike before counter-attacking with her left fist. The sheer strength from the woman's fist caused Shueilin to be lifted off her feet. Before Shueilin could even hope to brace herself, Sakura's gauntlet-clad hand grabbed the woman by her hair before slamming her skull directly through the terrain. A bright, crimson light emanated from the woman's gauntlet followed by the telltale howl of, "Boost." No. Please. Don't. Have mercy. Ravel pleaded to the pink-haired woman. Sakura seemed surprised by her words, evident by the way her head snapped towards her direction. Those emerald eyes of her bore into her very soul. The human was silent for a moment or so before narrowing her eyes and deactivating the buildup of power in her gauntlet. Ravel almost sighed in relief before her eyes widened in horror as Sakura stood to her feet before raising her foot in the air and stomping directly onto Shueilin's skull, forcefully retiring the girl. Shueilin has been eliminated. Ravel dropped to her knees in shock, watching the sheer brutality of the human before her. How were they supposed to win? This woman was a monster. She was too strong. Ravel's eyes widened in fear as the pink-haired woman turned her attention on her. The woman wasted no time in waltzing towards her direction, crimson gauntlet gleaming with the dried blood of her fellow peerage members. Ravel fell onto her rear, desperately clawing her way backwards to try to escape from this monster. Ravel! Mahai yelled in defense, appearing in front of the downed girl with demonic energy surging between her hands. Stay away from her. A dark orb of purple energy was shot directly at Sakura, who glared at the attack before backhanding the blast away, ignoring how it detonated against the village gates, bringing them down in the process. Mahai's own eyes widened at the casual display of power before charging another purple orb. If never made it to completion as Sakura's gauntlet-clad fist struck the woman directly in her sternum. She was rocketed through the massive gates not a moment later, crashing into various trees. Mahai has been eliminated. Sakura ignored the announcement as she continued to stalk towards Ravel. She proceeded to raise her hand towards Ravel, fingers outstretched to grasp at the woman's face. When her hand was less than an inch away from Ravel, Sakura was engulfed in an explosion of flames that sent her body flying into various buildings. Not a moment later did the flames that had previously engulfed her shine a brilliant gold, before abruptly exploding.
That oughta teach that bitch. Riser sneered angrily, calmly floating down and landing in front of his younger sister. He turned his head towards her, eyes softening for but a moment before abruptly returning towards the direction he had sent Sakura in. The sight he saw nearly had him gnashing his teeth together fiercely. Walking out of the explosion of fire with but a few singes, Sakura seemed to be living up to the Juggernaut title she was no doubt going to possess after this raiding game.
Is that all? Sakura taunted with a bored tint to her emerald eyes. I didn't even feel that. The pink-haired woman raised her hands in the air, as if to say, what can you do? Before speaking, no, I'm curious about something, Riser. The medic paused for a moment, glancing around her surroundings before finding a rather large piece of debris and sitting atop it. Why do you hold up traditions that you don't seem to really care for? Riser furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. What are you talking about, human? His tone was acidic towards the end, letting Sakura know how he felt about her being a human. Not that she'd ever care. Are ya stupid or something? Incapable of comprehending basic questions? Sakura insulted with a raised eyebrow, enjoying how angry the man got. Why did you care about the marriage contract so much? It's none of your business, whore. What devils do or don't do is none of your concern. Sakura ignored the basic insult with ease. I'd say it is my business considering I'm here, fighting for Ria's freedom. She crossed one of her legs over the other, making herself comfortable. You already know you can't defeat me. I'm out of your league. I'm stronger than you could ever hope to be. So I'm curious, Riser. She paused for a moment, leaning her upper body forward. Why do you continue fighting, knowing that I'm only going to crush you in the end? The arrogant devil balled his fists angrily as flames began to waft off his body. You think I'd submit to a human? Sakura rolled her eyes, speaking condescendingly for but a moment. I never said you had to submit, you moron. She shook her head as the boy seethed in rage. I asked you, why are you fighting against overwhelming odds? This entire match is being broadcasted to thousands upon thousands of individuals in the underworld. Knowing this, you're allowing yourself to be humiliated in front of your peers. Even now, we're only talking because I choose for us to do so. You don't have the strength nor the power to even challenge me. Sakura leaned her chin on her fist, resting it upon her leg as she continued. Why not save the humiliating sting of defeat and just retire right now? It'd save you the pain I'm going to eventually cause you. Riser's flame only grew in intensity, so much so that Ravel began to scoot away from her brother, fearing for even her own safety. Sakura's sharp eyes caught it. Or perhaps, I should use your sister there as a message. Riser's eyes widened, though not in surprise but in rage. What could you hope to do if I decided to take this fight even remotely serious? You'd be unable to do anything, realistically speaking. Sakura shrugged her shoulders with a lackadaisical smile. If I wanted to, I'd mentally break her before physically breaking her body. I'd force you to watch as I dissect her. Force you to listen to her screams of pain. Her pleadings as she screams for her older brother to save her. Doesn't it pain you to hear the truth? That you'd be able to do nothing but watch. Does it not burn beneath your skin? An itch that just can't quite be scratched. Do you know what that is, Riser? She asked rhetorically, watching as the man began to slowly lose himself to his anger. It's weakness. Something you have an overabundance of. Her smile grew in size as she leaned back, raising her arms lazily. Give up, Riser. I'm only going to break you. I don't want to hurt your younger sister, but I'm not above using such tactics. I'll break her. Can you cope with the knowledge that she only suffered because of your arrogance? Enough. Riser screamed angrily, flames igniting around him and destroying the land. I'm going to fucking kill you. He launched himself at her not a second later, not seeing the disappointed expression on Sakura's face. Sakura closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the man to get closer before abruptly opening her eyes. She caught the man's fist with ease, withstanding the heat of his flames. Her eyes became stony as her grip increased nearly tenfold, turning Riser's bones to dust. Tugging the man's body towards her, Sakura's gauntlet speared the man through his stomach, ignoring the blood as it caked her fist and face. This is only going to hurt. A lot, Sakura whispered viciously. The woman gripped the man's spine, ignoring his agonizing scream. Lifting the man by the bones in his body, Sakura clenched her fists, turning his vertebrae to dust. Riser's scream of agony only fueled Sakura as she let his body fall. He didn't go very far as her left hand caught him by the chin, roughly cracking the man's jaw with her strength alone. I told you to give up. Now you're gonna suffer. She spat in his face before shattering the man's jaw and kicking him through the village. Sakura ran through several hand seals before flaring her chakra. Doden. Goramu no Jutsu. The ground beneath them began to shake before a gargantuan golem of rock and clay began to slowly rise. The rock creation roared loudly before rearing its massive arm back. Riser had only half a second to brace for the attack before the golem struck his down position, resulting in a minor earthquake. Doden. Ganbon Q. Sakura flared her chakra once more, not allowing Riser to utilize his family's immortality. Several mounds of earth and rock sprang up near Riser before crushing him together, similar to that of a coffin. Another 5 hand seals followed by a flare of her chakra. Doden. Doryuso. The earth and soil around Riser's entrapped form lurched before several dozen spikes shot out, spearing the earth-made coffin, stabbing into various parts of Riser's body. Another 4 hand seals followed by a flare of her chakra. Doden. Kaido Shokatsu. The earth quaked and shook around Riser before a gigantic man-made volcano sprang from his position, swallowing him whole. The construct of earth rose to the very heavens before Sakura flared her chakra once more, causing the man-made volcano to erupt in a fiery explosion. Tilting her head, Sakura glanced towards the man's younger sister before slowly making her way towards the girl. Ravel's eyes widened in fear before she began to launch several high-powered balls of flame at her. Each and every single one of them was batted aside as if they were nothing. No, stop, please. Ni-san, Ravel screamed, backing herself into a wall to try to escape from Sakura. Ni-san, please. Save me, please. Sakura stared at the younger girl before raising her foot and kicking the girl's skull into the wall. Ravel's head crashed through the concrete, head lulling due to the force of the strike. The former kunoichi sighed quietly before steeling her heart. Dropping to her haunches, she proceeded to grasp the younger girl by her twintails, dragging her along the earth and ignoring her cries. Ni-san, Ni-san, save me, don't let her hurt me. Ravel screamed and pleaded, fingers clawing at the soil as she desperately tried to escape. Tears streamed down her face as she grunted and cried, bloodying her fingernails as she kicked and screamed. Sakura ignored the girl's cries, knowing that she needed to send a message. And what better way to do so than here and now? Stealing her heart and mind, Sakura ruthlessly stomped down on the girl's skull to get her to stop screaming. It didn't work initially, so Sakura proceeded to stomp on her head 2 more times, nodding her head when the only sounds leaving the girl were her tears. Ni-san, she sniffled pitifully, tears streaming down her bloody face. Please, save me. If it's any consolation, Sakura spoke quietly. This isn't personal. I surrender. I quit. Please, take me away. Ni-san surrenders. No more. She cried desperately, her words becoming gibberish towards the end as she became more and more frantic. Before Sakura could further torment the younger girl, Graphia's voice resounded loudly. Riser Phoenix has surrendered. After those words, Sakura released her hold on the man's sister with a relieved sigh. Her sacred gear disappeared back into her body not a moment later. Ladies and gentlemen, behold, your winner, Sakura Haruno. By admission of surrender, Sakura Haruno is tonight's champion. She didn't necessarily feel like a champion. An act of cruelty, one witnessed by thousands upon of thousands of individuals in the underworld. Well, Sensei did say to give them one hell of a show. At least she provided that much. To be continued.